Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. American Comics. Extracting the Immortality of Cancer Cells at the Beginning. Chapter 81. I said, I'm here for tourism, do you believe me? Jonathan was in a playful mood, raised his hands, and responded innocently. He spoke Afghan fluently and naturally, without any foreign accent. In order to master Afghan, Jonathan specially found a non-local tour guide who could speak Arabic. Under the reverse transcription ability, Jonathan knocked the tour guide unconscious and extracted local pure Afghan. As for the reversal effect left in his body, it was considered as compensation for the knockout. Tourism. Do you think we are fools? A sentry sneered. He had been on guard here for so long, and it was the first time he heard someone use such a lame excuse to get away with it. This is a war zone. Where do tourists come from? Oh, a war zone. I just came to experience the style of a war zone. Jonathan shrugged. Look at my outfit, it has local characteristics. Are you from the 10 Rings gang? I know your leader. Hearing this, several sentinels looked at each other, not knowing what to do. This man wrapped his head tightly, leaving only 2 eyes exposed, and he really looked like an ordinary Afghan. But this is the secret base of the gang, and a stranger actually knows their leader. Just as they were hesitating, Jonathan, who suddenly lost his patience, suddenly accelerated and rushed over. Seeing this, the sentinels were shocked and pulled the trigger one after another. But Jonathan's movement speed was too fast, and the bullets could not hit him at all. In the blink of an eye, Jonathan rushed to the bottom of the sentry tower, and then lightly jumped up and easily jumped onto the sentry tower more than 5 meters high. What? The sentinels exclaimed, is this something a human can do? Before they could react, Jonathan had kicked a sentry away, and then grabbed the collar of another and lifted him up. Now, can you tell me where Tony Stark is? Jonathan showed the most sunny smile, trying to impress the sleepy sentry with his sincere emotions. But at this level of the soldier, he really didn't know Tony's existence. I don't know what you are talking about. The sentry stuttered, and his bladder suddenly tensed up. Alas, I know. Jonathan sighed, threw the sentry out of the tower, and ignored the sentry's screams. He looked at another sentry tower. At this time, the 2 sentries on the other sentry tower finally reacted and raised their guns to fire. But Jonathan was prepared. He shot 2 precise lasers from his eyes. The next second, the guns of the 2 melted instantly, and the hand of one of the sentries was fused together by the melted weapon, becoming a real Iron Man. The other sentry was so frightened that he dropped his hot weapon in panic and turned to run away. What are you so nervous about? Jonathan jumped easily, crossed 10 meters and landed easily. He grabbed the sentry's collar and lifted him up. I ask again, where is Tony Stark? I really don't know. I just know that a big shot was captured recently and is in the cave inside. After hearing the answer, Jonathan nodded with satisfaction, then returned a warm look as a thank you, then jumped off the sentry tower and walked towards the cave. The cautious leader of the 10 Rings gang not only set up 2 sentry towers at the front checkpoint, but also had a large number of soldiers guarding the door every day at the entrance of the cave, taking turns to take turns on duty according to batches. In addition, they were specially equipped with heavy firepower, and Stark's arsenal was also next to them, which was enough to deal with any invaders at any time. So, when Jonathan's obviously out-of-place figure appeared in front of these stationed soldiers, they noticed it immediately. Who is it? The shift leader shouted, and all the soldiers around him raised their submachine guns in unison and pointed their guns at Jonathan. But Jonathan did not respond to them, but rushed towards them at an extremely fast speed. Enemy attack, it's an enemy attack. Fire now. After reacting, the captain immediately ordered the soldiers to shoot at Jonathan. The next second, an extremely fierce net of bullets rushed towards Jonathan. Jonathan had long been accustomed to one-on-many combat scenes. After turning on full-body energy absorption and conversion, Jonathan rushed into the crowd like a beast. After several bullets hit Jonathan's body, they lost kinetic energy and fell to the ground, and then Jonathan's heavy punch with kinetic energy instantly knocked the firepower encirclement open. Everyone, try this. Jonathan suddenly remembered the classic move of the green fat man, and then concentrated all the kinetic energy absorbed by his body on his palm. At the same time, Jonathan's entire arm and palm began to emit dazzling light, and then he closed his hands suddenly. The next moment, a strong wind with extremely strong destructive power burst out from Jonathan's hands, and the soldiers closest to Jonathan were blown back in an instant, and fell heavily on the ground and screamed in pain. Jonathan's palm can be called a model of AoE. Soldiers within a radius of 5 meters were knocked to the ground by him, and basically no one could stand steadily. At this time, the firepower attack from the outer circle still hit Jonathan like raindrops, and there were no less than 1,000 bullets piled up under his feet. Seeing that ordinary bullets were useless, the captain who was hiding at the back and giving orders quickly changed the plan and asked the soldiers to take out rockets from the arsenal and bomb the place where Jonathan was. The well-trained militia quickly assembled the rocket launcher, and at the captain's command, they pressed the trigger. The rocket immediately blew out a strong mist and flew towards Jonathan. At this time, Jonathan, who heard the loud noise, naturally reacted and looked up. It was the rocket he hated so much again. This time, Jonathan did not let the rocket bomb, but actively concentrated the energy in his eyes, emitting 2 hot lines of sight. As soon as his sight touched the rocket, it exploded. The soldiers who were close to him were directly blown away by the violent energy contained in the explosion. Some of them disintegrated directly in midair, and blood mist filled the sky. In the huge black fog fireball, Jonathan could still observe the soldiers carrying bioenergy in his eyes. As his body continued to absorb it, the fireball seemed to be continuously compressed by the air, and only a flame was left in the end. At the same time, the black fog slowly dispersed, and the soldiers stared with wide eyes, wanting to see if the invader fell to the ground and died. Surprise! Through the soldiers' vision, they could see that Jonathan was in good condition. His clothes were smooth and flat, without any black dust, and even without any trace of burning. How is this possible? When the captain saw this scene, he felt that the worldview he had cultivated for more than 30 years was completely shattered. Quickly inform the leader. You guys, continue to attack, and you must hold on. Just as the soldiers were in a hurry to continue to fight back, Jonathan suddenly turned into a blazing light and flashed into the group of soldiers at an extremely fast speed. While moving, Jonathan's body suddenly rose like a transformation, and his clothes were filled with refined muscles with free magma fluid, and then broke into rags. Jonathan's extremely exaggerated impact directly tore people apart, leaving broken limbs and arms everywhere. Stepping on a solid ground, Jonathan jumped into the air. His eyes quickly gathered a large amount of compressed energy, and burst out a continuous huge beam of light. The ground hit by these beams of light all caused violent explosions. Following Jonathan's sight, the munitions that were closely together were also detonated by Jonathan. At the same time, Jonathan released and replenished energy through the explosion. In a short period of time, this actually formed a wonderful balance. And at this time, the violent explosions outside also reached the cave where Tony and Ethan were. Why are there sounds of fighting outside? And explosions? Ethan was in front of the computer, entering the final data of the armor. It must be Rod, he came to save me. We can't delay any longer, we have to start the armor immediately. Before the people outside find out, it will be too late to be discovered. But the data of the armor has not been recorded yet. Too late. With the help of Ethan's computer operation, Tony eagerly began to put on the armor, but the armor's startup process was much slower than expected, and it took about 5 minutes of breaking time. The system is not fully ready. It will take a while to fully operate, Ethan said anxiously while debugging the various functions of the armor. Hey, Ji Li Ji Yula. Tony's actions in the cave were not deliberately hidden. After the leader and his men who had been watching the surveillance found out, they hurriedly yelled in bird language and rushed into the cave with their weapons. For a while, there were mixed footsteps outside, and Tony estimated that there were no less than 10 people coming. At this time, Ethan looked at the direction of the cave entrance, and then looked at the busy Tony, and made a decision. Tony, we don't have that much time. You continue to prepare the armor, I'll go out and explore the way first. What? No, it's too dangerous. Tony tried to stop him, but the restraint of the armor prevented him from moving quickly. At this time, Ethan had already picked up a homemade gun and checked the ammunition. Don't worry, I'll be careful. We have to buy more time, otherwise we will all die here. Quick, check the cave. Hearing the sound coming from the outside world getting closer and closer, Ethan didn't hesitate, simply nodded to Tony, and then rushed out. Good luck. Without waiting for Tony to object again, Ethan had quickly moved to the vicinity of the cave entrance, hiding behind a large rock. He took a deep breath, then leaned out and fired a few shots at the outside of the cave. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of gunfire echoed in the cave. Someone is shooting inside. Send more people up quickly. Quote. There was a panic shout from outside. Ethan's action did have a temporary effect, but the number of the attacking soldiers was large. When they found that Ethan was the only one, they moved forward without hesitation, and kept shooting at the shelter where Ethan was hiding. Tony, what's the situation? Ethan asked loudly, while vigilantly observing the movement at the entrance of the cave. It will take a little time. Tony shouted. The system is starting, but it's not stable enough. At this time, the attack outside was getting more and more fierce, and bullets kept hitting the rocks around the entrance of the cave. Ethan tried his best to stretch out his gun to fight back, but he knew that his ammunition was limited and he couldn't hold on for too long. They have strong firepower, Ethan shouted. I don't know how long I can hold on. Quote. At this moment, Tony, who had finally completed the data entry, gritted his teeth and pulled out all the power supply lines connected to the armor. With the external restrictions disconnected, Tony finally drove the heavy armor forward while initializing the weapon system in his hand. At the same time, the activation of the armor directly exhausted the power supply in the entire cave, all the lights went out, and the environment in the cave suddenly fell into darkness. Very good, Ethan. Ready, get out of the way. Quote. Tony activated the air pressure thrusters on his hind legs to speed up his forward speed. The heavy iron made a muffled sound when it stepped on the ground, shaking off the dust on the rock wall in the cave. At the same time, the weapon system in Tony's hand had also completed the braking. When he appeared at the turning point of the cave entrance, Tony launched an attack without hesitation. In the vague vision of the advancing soldiers, it was a huge, iron man, with a body of nearly 2 meters, welded with thick steel and leather. There was also a LED lampshade with a bright yellow light on his chest, and a bullet barrel and a flamethrower were installed on his hands. When Ethan heard what Tony said, he immediately retreated backwards in cooperation, leaving the battlefield to Tony, and at the same time helped to share the pressure with a gun. Seeing Ethan make way, Tony quickly controlled the armor and rushed to the turning point. At this time, the soldiers who rushed up one after another, pointed their guns at Tony and immediately fired. But Tony had anticipated this scene long ago, and he specially thickened his key parts such as his chest armor and face armor. The bullets hit him except for a little impact, and he also simply polished the armor surface, and the smooth surface could bounce a large number of bullets away. Tony pushed out with one hand, and the huge kinetic energy attached to the armor directly knocked the approaching soldiers away. The whole huge figure rushed through the crowd of soldiers like a whirlwind, and no bullet could break Tony's defense. But just as Tony was trying to tear open the enemy's encirclement, Ethan, who was cooperating in the battle, was suddenly hit in the shoulder, and then the whole person fell to the ground in pain and cried. Ethan's body size was originally being thin and malnourished due to being locked up in the cave for a long time. His body was full of pain. Just being shot made Ethan almost faint. Ethan, seeing this, Tony hurriedly wanted to go over to check on Ethan, but the leader of the 10 Rings gang, who had been watching from behind the soldiers, was not idle. He took advantage of Tony's panic and directly pressed the rocket. The next second, the warhead whizzed towards Tony. Tony heard the sound and quickly turned his head away. But the leader's aim was really bad. This attack not only did not hit Tony, but also stimulated Tony's desire to attack. So, Tony put his right hand on the mechanical switch on the left armor, and it was pulled open with a buckle. A small missile flew out of the barrel in his hand and exploded directly on the rock above the leader's head. The falling fragments directly buried the leader. At this time, Tony quickly came to Ethan's side. Ethan was already somewhat unconscious at this time, and blood was constantly oozing from the wound on his right arm. Ethan, wait for me. I'll go find a doctor, or see if there are any emergency medicines. Tony knew that staying here all the time was not a solution. Only by breaking out of the cave could he find hope to save Ethan. As a partner and lifesaver these days, Tony was unwilling to see Ethan die here. Tony, go away. In fact, my family has been killed by them a long time ago. But Tony ignored Ethan's words, and still resolutely cleared the surrounding enemies. As the sunlight from the outside world became brighter and brighter, Tony followed the bright spot and finally found the entrance to the cave. Just when he was about to rush out of the cave, the violent explosion and terrified shouting from outside made Tony feel extremely surprised. Nothing else. Tony watched helplessly as a soldier was blown to the side of the cave entrance, and his thigh was also missing. It didn't look like an explosion injury, but more like it was torn off by someone. Wardfake. What on earth is going on? Tearing off a person's legs. When did Rhodes's troops have such lethality? Thinking of this, Tony quickly became cautious. In this case, he suspected that there was a possibility of other gangs invading. After all, this was Afghanistan. At this time, the huge Tony who had just appeared at the entrance of the cave was also discovered by the soldiers who were surrounded behind. Seeing that something was wrong, the soldiers quickly picked up their submachine guns and shot at Tony's face. But these injuries had no effect on Tony now. In order to quickly break through the encirclement, Tony chose to activate the high-temperature flamethrowers in his left and right hands and waved them at these soldiers. For a while, the sprayed flames quickly touched these soldiers. Some soldiers closest to Tony were roasted by the high temperature before they even had time to react. And other soldiers who were also touched by the fire had no desire to attack after finding that their bodies were on fire, and they quickly paid attention to the flames attached to their bodies. But just as Tony was concentrating on the soldiers in front of him, a soldier standing not far away spotted him, so he activated his rocket launcher and aimed at him. At this time, Tony suddenly noticed something with a tail flame coming towards him from his peripheral vision. He thought it was bad, and quickly turned off the flamethrower, then used the fastest speed to control the clumsy armor to jump to the side to avoid it. Boom! The rocket detonated outside the cave, and there was a huge explosion, and the flames rose. At the same time, Jonathan, who was driving through the crowd, also noticed the explosion at the first time. After using the thermal vision to kill 2 heads in seconds, Jonathan turned his head and squinted his eyes. His vision penetrated the blood mist and looked straight at the entrance of the cave. There was still the residual flames produced by the explosion. After the black smoke dissipated with the wind, a huge silver, iron armor, struggling to get up from the ground was revealed. Although the shape was rough and the appearance was simple, Jonathan could recognize it as the prototype of the steel armor at a glance. The most classic Mark I. It seems that Tony has already done it himself. Jonathan said to himself. Then I am a little redundant. But he soon realized that Tony's current situation was not optimistic. The rocket just now hit the lower part of the armor, and a lot of iron pieces fell out. Looking at Tony's limping appearance, it was probably broken. Although the steel armor can withstand most bullets, a large number of armed soldiers are still approaching, and it seems that Tony is obviously not familiar with the operation of the armor, and his movements are extremely clumsy. Forget it, I still have to help him. Jonathan sighed, and then the red energy all over his body burst into a violent light. After shaking off the surrounding soldiers who were resisting stubbornly, he stepped on the ground with one foot to gain leverage, and then turned into a stream of light flashing under the pushback of the broken stones, stepped left and right, and ran towards Tony quickly. At this time, Tony, who had just gotten up, was struggling to deal with attacks from all directions. The air pressure thrusters on his feet were malfunctioning due to the attack of the rocket launcher. For a moment, he could not take off and leave the battlefield. He could only consume the energy in the flamethrower to try his best to prevent these soldiers who kept coming to him from approaching him. Why are there so many of these guys? Tony cursed. He raised his arm, trying to adjust his position to launch the missile again, but accidentally fell again. At this moment, a strong wind came, blowing up the dust on the ground, almost blinding Tony's eyes. When his vision returned to normal, he saw a scene that shattered his worldview. It was a human-shaped light and shadow with an incredible speed, which appeared in front of him without warning, moving as fast as lightning, and knocked down several militants in an instant. Tony looked at the man who suddenly appeared in shock. Let's just call him a human, because according to Tony's academic knowledge over the years, it is impossible for a fluid like magma to exist on the human body surface, and it can also emit lasers from the eyes. Isn't this Superman? But isn't that a comic published by DC? But this guy doesn't wear red pants. Quote. Who are you? Tony couldn't help asking. His eyes were as big as copper bells, shooting out lightning-like doubts. Oh, Tony, I'm sad when you say this. We just met half a month ago. Jonathan pretended to be sad, tidied his hairstyle a little, and then temporarily retracted the energy circulation of his head, and his pupils and hair color faded back, revealing his original appearance. The most recognizable black hair and black pupils. You are Jonathan. Are you the CEO of that company? How did you? Tony opened his mouth wide and was about to say something, but suddenly saw another rocket flying towards them. He tried to dodge subconsciously, but Jonathan seemed to be stupid and stood still. Hey, be careful, Tony shouted. But the next second, what shocked Tony was that Jonathan seemed to have eyes on his back. Without looking back, he stretched out one hand and easily caught the rocket flying at high speed. Then, Jonathan pinched it casually, and the rocket exploded on the spot. But the violent energy of the explosion was captured by Jonathan's palm with a high frequency when it was about to burst. The red energy turned into flocculent lines in a visible form, and then was absorbed by Jonathan. You don't tell me that this can be trained by fitness. Tony's surprised expression seemed a little sour. Jonathan shrugged. Exercise is good for your health. Maybe you'll see another bald guy who's even better at fitness in the future, but now, should we leave here first? Tony slowly came to his senses after hearing this and nodded. Yes, we have to leave quickly, but... He looked around, as if looking for something. Ethan, my friend, Tony said anxiously. He's still inside, with a gunshot wound to his shoulder. We have to save him. Jonathan raised his eyebrows unexpectedly when he heard this. Didn't Ethan die in the original book? Could it be a butterfly effect that came by itself? I'll go find him, you wait here, don't run around. After saying that, Jonathan flashed into the cave, and Tony wanted to catch up behind him, but the bulky armor made his movements unusually slow. If this guy has a girlfriend, then she must be very happy. That's all. Tony gave up chasing, complained and broke the missile in his hand, and as long as the enemy approached, he would give them the warmest greetings. In the cave, Ethan was lying behind a pile of rocks. Although he was injured, he managed to hold on and moved with a gun. Just when Ethan was about to collapse, a red figure suddenly rushed in. Who are you? Ethan wiped his eyes, thinking he was hallucinating. After he confirmed that it was real, he asked vigilantly. I'm Tony's friend, I'm here to save you. Jonathan said. Follow me. Although Ethan had 10,000 doubts in his heart, he knew that this was not the time to ask more questions. So Jonathan carried him on his shoulders, rushed out of the cave, and soon met Tony, who was waiting outside. Ethan, are you okay? Seeing his savior, Tony asked anxiously. It's okay, Tony. Ethan covered his wound and answered hoarsely. But we have to leave here quickly. The army of the 10 Rings is definitely on the way. If we don't leave now, it will be too late. But at this time, Tony was in trouble. The air pressure boost flight system of the armor was just blown up by a rocket launcher. I'm afraid we can only go from other places. And, we must do it as soon as possible. The munitions will soon be spread by the fire, and then it will definitely cause a chain explosion. Ah, how could this happen? Ethan frowned. How about, I'll cover you here, and you go first. Just then, Jonathan said. Actually, there's no need to be so troublesome. I can take you out. No, you shouldn't be able to fly, right? Just kidding, how can humans fly? Hold on to me. Hearing this, Ethan and Tony looked at each other. At this point, they could only trust Jonathan. So, Ethan grabbed Jonathan's arm with one hand, and Tony struggled to get out of the armor, and Jonathan locked his shoulders. Hold on tight. As he spoke, Jonathan's eyes flashed red, and he immediately poured most of his energy into his lower limbs, gathering strength, stepping on the ground, and soaring into the sky. Buzz. As he broke through the ground, the sound of breaking wind was startled, and Jonathan, Ethan, and Tony were ejected from the spot and fled at a very fast speed. Tony and Ethan, who were being pulled up, felt that everything in front of them was blurry, and the surrounding scenery was rapidly receding. When they reacted, they had already been taken away from the base of the 10 Rings gang by Jonathan. Following a few jumping machines, they came to an open desert. Not long after landing, there was a violent explosion behind them. Ethan looked back and found that the whole valley was blown into a sea of fire, and there was even a mushroom cloud rising up. Tony was right. If it was a little later, they would definitely not be able to get away. Ethan felt terrible just thinking about the feeling of being wrapped in flames to death. But what was more terrifying was that he and Tony were extremely unaccustomed to this kind of short-term acceleration to the extreme weightlessness dizziness. When Jonathan let them go, they immediately ran to the side and vomited on the ground. Due to the emergency, they didn't eat anything in the morning. They relied on their willpower to support themselves, and what they vomited was some gastric juice. Ahem. Tony supported himself on the ground, waved his hands, and said with great effort, "This is even scarier than a centrifuge. Sorry, I was so lost in the dancing." Jonathan shrugged, and while the two were not paying attention, he took out several sets of clothes from the system space, and put one of them on himself with his mind. Ethan and Tony, who finally recovered, turned their heads and saw that Jonathan had suddenly changed, and he was holding two neat sets of clothes in his hands. Both of them were confused again. Tony walked up and looked at Jonathan's body from top to bottom. There was no place to store them, right? Shit, where did you get these two sets of clothes? Could it be some kind of space technology? And, are you really a human? Tony stared at Jonathan suspiciously. What happened in the past few hours almost shattered his belief in materialism. Take away the claws you just spit out. Put on these two sets of clothes first. I guess you haven't taken a shower for a while. Jonathan, friendly, pinched his nose and handed the clothes to Tony and Ethan, which earned Tony's extremely speechless eyes. If it weren't for saving him, if he dared to dislike the great Tony Stark, he would let him know why the flowers are so red. By the way, are we in the desert? How do we get out? Don't worry, I've already contacted someone before I came. Look, they're coming. Jonathan said casually, pointing his finger behind him. In the field of vision, several propellers slowly rose in the twisted hot air. Looking closely, they were several military-armed helicopters. It's Rod, he's finally here. Tony saw the familiar figure on the plane, and the big stone in his heart was instantly put down. The whole person sat softly on the ground, waiting for rescue. Rod, so he is Rod. Then who is this? Ethan was a little confused. Tony said that a friend had saved him before, and he always thought that Jonathan was Roddy. If Roddy has this ability, why would he be a colonel? He is Jonathan, a liar who likes fitness. Tony, who was lying down, was silent for a while, and then said, "Oh my God, I want to eat cheeseburgers." 3 o'clock in the afternoon. When the helicopter landed at the private airport in New York, Tony felt a trance. 3 months of imprisonment seemed like a nightmare, and at this moment, he finally returned to the world he was familiar with. Tony. A familiar voice came, and Tony turned around and saw his dreamy secretary Pepper. "Hey, Pepper." Tony pretended to show a teasing smile. "Missed me?" At this time, tears flashed in Pepper's eyes, but she still resisted crying. "Boss, you fool," she whispered. "Do you know how worried I was?" "Oh, Pepper, sorry for the wait, I'm back now, right?" Tony opened his arms and gave Pepper a hug, but she dodged. "I know you're angry." Gurgle. Just then, Tony's stomach made a loud gurgling sound. He was stunned for a few seconds, and then showed an awkward but polite smile. "I'm sorry, Pepper. I want to eat a cheeseburger." "Boss, I think you should take a good rest first. There are many reporters squatting outside Stark Tower waiting for you." "No, I want to eat a cheeseburger." So, in front of everyone's shock's eyes, the first thing Tony Stark, the billionaire who had just been rescued, did was to run to a hamburger shop and personally pack 3 cheeseburgers with extra stuff. Just as Tony walked out of the store and wolfed down the third hamburger, Coulson, who had been waiting at the door for a long time, came to him and said, "Mr. Stark." Coulson said, "I am Coulson from the Strategic Homeland Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency. I came here to discuss your safety." Tony raised his head, his mouth still full of food. He swallowed a big mouthful and then said puzzledly, "What agency? Why is your name so long and smelly? As for safety issues, I'm back, aren't I?" Hearing this, Coulson's expression became serious. "Your kidnapping may be just the beginning, Mr. Stark. We have reason to believe that there may be someone else who wants to hurt you." "Oh, no." Tony smacked his lips and sucked his index finger with cheese sauce. "Man, I'm Tony Stark, the most powerful brain. There must be many people who want to harm me. But I will never let them succeed again. And I have to do something big. Tony waved his hand and asked Pepper, who was waiting on the side, to come over. Get ready for me, I want to hold a press conference. Hearing this, Pepper frowned beautifully. But boss, I suggest you take a break first, and it won't be too late to hold it in the evening. No, no, Tony took a deep breath. It's time to change something, the sooner the better. Half an hour later, Tony stood in front of a temporary podium outside Stark Tower and looked around. He saw the eyes of the media reporters eating melons, and saw Obadiah standing aside, his eyes filled with gloom for some reason, and Agent Coulson from the department with a long name just now was also on the scene. Ahem. Tony took a deep breath, cleared his lungs, and then began his speech. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice was firm and powerful. In the past 3 months, I have experienced something that made me think deeply. The venue was quiet, and everyone listened attentively with bated breath. I didn't say goodbye to my father. I have some questions for him. I want to ask him what he thinks about what the company is doing. Has he struggled with doubts, or is he like the people in the news documentaries you saw? I saw our weapons fall into the hands of terrorists, and young people were killed. The weapons that killed them were the weapons I made to protect them. Tony continued. I also saw that I had become part of this irresponsible system, and this is obviously not what I want. Stark, sir, what did you experience there? At this time, the reporters in the audience began to ask questions. I opened my eyes. I can do more for this time than make these weapons. Tony paused, his eyes swept across the audience, and finally fixed on Pepper standing in front. So, Tony took a deep breath, closed his eyes and then opened them again. I have decided that from now on, the weapons department of Stark International will be closed. Hearing this, the entire venue was instantly in an uproar, and reporters began to frantically try to break through the police encirclement and run up to ask questions. Obadiah, who was standing below the stage, was even more livid. He hurriedly walked up to the stage and pulled Tony's clothes, and said anxiously in a low voice, Tony, are you crazy? How low do you think the stock price will fall tomorrow? Oh, optimistically estimated to be 40 points, at least. Tony raised his eyebrows, looking indifferent. Tony, we are a weapons manufacturer, this is our job, our name is written on the building, and our job keeps society from falling into chaos. As he spoke, Obadiah's face became more and more excited. But that's not what I saw. We can do better. We can make other things. What, do you want us to make baby bottles? I think we should reconsider the arc reactor technology. Come on, it's just a gimmick. Tony, please, we built this just to shut up those hippies. You know the arc reactor's effectiveness is not good at all. We knew it before we built it. Besides, we are a team, right? As long as we work hard, there is nothing we can't do, just like I discussed with your father back then. Sorry, Stan, I didn't discuss it with you, but I've decided, so let it be. With that, Tony left Obadiah, who was extremely annoyed, hanging there, pulled Pepper, asked the bodyguards to push the crowd away, got in the supercar and drove away. Obadiah cursed on the spot, stomping his leather-shoed feet hard on the ground, scaring the reporter next to him. What are you filming? Get out of here, right now. At the same time, Jonathan was leisurely lying in the open-air garden on the top floor of his company, sunbathing, enjoying a massage and checking the news on his mobile phone. Tony Stark has been rescued and the stock price of Stark Industries has soared. Jonathan whispered, Not bad, not bad, it seems that my operation this time was very successful. He put down his mobile phone, closed his eyes and enjoyed the massage. Suddenly, he seemed to remember something, opened his eyes and looked at the ceiling. After returning, Dr. Stern sent a text message to his mobile phone, but he started to rest as soon as he came back and did not check his mobile phone. Bruce Banner is really coming back from India. Jonathan looked at the text message and was a little shocked. Although he didn't know the specific inside story, in the plot of The Incredible Hulk, General Ross of the U.S. military had been keeping a close eye on his position, and the policy adopted was to capture him alive, and if not, he would kill him. Then his return this time means that he has to take the risk of being discovered by General Ross and connect with his own doctor. This is also the lure order Jonathan gave to the doctor. This was originally just a casual move by Jonathan, but he didn't expect that he would take the bait. But taking the bait is taking the bait. If he contacts Banner again, he will inevitably conflict with General Ross. And in terms of military rank and status, he is much higher than his father on the surface. If something unexpected happens, he really can't afford it. The reason why Jonathan wants to recruit Dr. Banner, this big trouble, is not only because of his 7 doctoral degrees, but also because of the potential green fat combat power. But the combat power of Hulk is unstable after all. If Banner really wants to get rid of the threat of Hulk, then Jonathan can indeed take action and use the reverse transcription ability to help solve it. The only unstable thing is that Jonathan's ability is not useful to everyone. Once the object used is higher than himself, there is a probability that the reversal will fail, and the conditions for achieving it will become more stringent. If it is not an absolute situation, Jonathan does not want to hold the hand of a big man to complete the reverse transcription. It is really a bit scary. Moreover, Hulk's upper limit can even exceed green sorrow, so Jonathan has already prepared for the failure of transformation. It's really one wave after another. I haven't rested for long. Jonathan is helpless, but in order to enhance his strength in all aspects to deal with the old man Yudi, he has to do it even if he is busy. There is still 1 year before the expiration of the term, so we have to hurry up. The scene changes. Tony's luxurious sea view villa, in the basement. Pepper, how big are your hands? I don't quite understand what you mean. Stretch out your hand. It's very small and delicate, come and help me see. As he said that, Tony threw his shirt aside and showed the arc reactor on his chest. Oh my God, is that the little thing you said that sustains your life? It was before, but now it's an antique. I got an upgraded version. This should be the one that sustains me in the future. Tony took out a more delicate and complete reactor from the storage table next to him, and there was a blue ring tube on the surface as an energy decoration. It's just that I'm facing some obstacles now. What obstacles? There is an exposed wire under this old device that touches the wall and forms a short circuit. Don't worry, it's okay. Come on, help me replace it. This is a little difficult for me. It's okay, it's just like a game. Just connect the wires, you're the only one I can trust here. Okay, well, there's pus. No, that's the inorganic protoplasm released by the device, don't worry about it. Do you see the copper wire? Just connect it. I saw a magnet, I pulled it out. Oh don't, what's wrong? It's okay, it's just that my heart is about to stop, put it back. After a series of minimally invasive surgeries, Pepper finally helped Tony replace the arc reactor. What should we do with this? Burn it, destroy it. You know, Stark has never had the habit of nostalgia. Hearing this, Pepper, with a strange look on her face, carefully put away the arc, her heart was in turmoil. It seems that Tony's birthday is coming soon. Otherwise, decorate it and give it to him. Jarvis, are you there? Quote, in the basement, Tony, wearing a white vest and holding 2 wrenches in his hands, said to the air. For you, sir, I am always here. I want to create a new project document, marked as Mark II. Tony stared at the tattered Mark I armor in the center of the laboratory with a complicated expression. It was this armor made of scrap metal that helped him escape from the clutches of the Ten Rings terrorists. Well, it's not an escape, although he was rescued, but the great Tony Stark would never admit his technical problems. If there was no Jonathan, he believed that he could escape, but now some technology still needs to be improved. Should I store all the files in Stark Industries? In fact, I don't know who I should trust now, until I say it again. Then upload the data to my private server first. Tony thought about it and gave Jarvis instructions. Want to study secret projects, sir? Quote, To be honest, I don't want this thing to fall into the hands of bad people again. Maybe it can do some good things in my hands. Okay, sir. The male voice of the artificial intelligence butler Jarvis sounded. The next second, a blue beam began to sweep back and forth on the surface of the basic armor of Mark I, accurately recording every detail and uploading it to the server. Tony turned and walked towards his holographic projection table. With his gestures, the 3-dimensional image of Mark I slowly unfolded in the air, and a holographic blue magazine-type keyboard appeared in his hand. Tony stared at the rough design of Mark II, carefully, thought for a while, and suddenly showed an extremely disgusted expression. Look at the installation angle of this thruster, it's a joke. he said to himself. And this energy distribution system, the efficiency is outrageous. How did I make this shit? Quote. But then, Tony showed an awkward but polite smile. However, considering that it was made of scrap metal in a cave, this cannot be regarded as a stain on the creation of the great Tony Stark. Tony took a deep breath, his eyes firm. Okay, it's time for some real high tech. Jarvis. Sir, do you have any specific instructions? Tony's fingers quickly swiped in the air, calling up the design drawings of dozens of subsystems. First, we need a brand new power source. That car battery can't even last 10 minutes, a miniaturized arc reactor, the output power must be at least 3 times higher than the one on the chest. Jarvis, what do you think? Sir, in theory, this design can indeed achieve your goal, sir. But I must point out that 78% of the technology is still in the experimental stage and has never been used in actual engineering. Quote. Tony was depressed when he heard this. This artificial intelligence, why does it always like to tell the truth? I don't believe it. Will the great Tony Stark be stumped by this technology? Jarvis, start the simulation thread. See if the 10% propulsion energy can be increased. According to preliminary calculations, sir, to increase such a large output without increasing the volume, it may be necessary to use some untested new materials. Hearing Jarvis' words, Tony raised his eyebrows unhappily. Jarvis, when did, untested, scare me? Go check what new superconducting materials there are. Oh, by the way, contact Professor Jackson of MIT to see if there is any new progress in his project. Yes, sir. Quote. For the next few hours, Tony was completely immersed in the design, and the holographic projection kept changing, showing an increasingly complex mechanical structure. The first is the energy plan. The most critical technological breakthrough of Mark II lies in its power source, the micro-arc reactor. Tony has comprehensively upgraded the first-generation reactor, increasing the energy density of the new version of the reactor by 300%, while reducing the original weight by 40%, focusing on lightness. Between the heavy and extremely heavy and the simulated operation experience of a 500-pound fat man, Tony now just wants to make a portable armor, and Tony doesn't want to experience the feeling of being pot-bellied again. Anti-Hulk Armor Mk-44 Veronica. The second is stability. By improving the synthesis process of palladium elements, Tony developed a complex automatic adjustment algorithm that enables the reactor to dynamically adjust the energy output according to the real-time needs of the armor. At the same time, he also optimized the interface and reduced the energy transmission by 95%. The energy of the reactor can be efficiently distributed to each system of the armor to reduce the loss of energy. For the structural design of the armor exoskeleton, Tony intends to focus on lightweight and strengthening the balance. No other reason. Because of Jonathan's experience of vomiting during flight, Tony wants to consider adding the flight function of the second-generation armor. At this time, an alloy material that is strong enough to withstand high-intensity impact is needed. Through Jarvis's screening, Tony chose a new type of titanium alloy, which is 5 times stronger than ordinary titanium alloys but only 80% lighter. In addition, this alloy also has shape memory properties, which can quickly return to its original state after being attacked, and is very suitable for recovery after injury. Finally, there is modular design. The entire suit of armor was decomposed into hundreds of precision parts by Tony, each of which can be replaced, upgraded, and assembled separately. Some parts of the armor adopt a deformable design, which can automatically adjust the shape according to the flight posture. Finally, Tony covered the outer layer of the armor with a special coating that is only a few nanometers thick. These coatings can absorb most electromagnetic waves and reduce the radar cross-section. So far, the silver streamlined, high-tech, Mark II, has been completed. Looking at this big baby, Tony rubbed his sore eyes, his face full of excitement. He couldn't wait to put on the armor and pretend to be 13. But at this moment, a doorbell interrupted his interest. Mr. Obadiah is here and is upstairs now. What do you think I should say? Forget it, I'll go up now. When Tony thought about meeting Obadiah, he felt uncomfortable all over. Although he was a loyal partner of the dead father, his hands have always been not very clean. Tony turned a blind eye to inserting his hands into the board of directors and interfering with the weapons department. But the most important thing is, it is obviously his own weapons department. Why would weapons be sold to the terrorists of the Ten Rings gang? Out of basic trust, Tony thought that there might be a mistake in Obadiah's men. But he always felt uncomfortable. Tony took a deep breath, straightened his clothes, and slowly walked up the stairs. Tony, my good nephew. Obadiah Stan opened his arms and forced a smile on his face as soon as he saw Tony. You are finally willing to come out of that basement. Tony squeezed out a tired smile and hugged Obadiah symbolically. To be honest, he didn't know what his purpose was this time. Since he chose to intervene in the board of directors, he rarely came to the villa to find him in person like this. Stan, you know, I have been busy. Some important things. Important things. Obadiah raised his eyebrows. For example, new weapon design. At this point, an inexplicable temptation flashed in his eyes. A few days ago, he got a photo of a giant armor from the remaining gang members of the Ten Rings gang. This photo is said to be made by Tony in the cave with a refugee scholar named Ethan. Therefore, he spent a lot of money to bring the remains of the armor back to his department. This time, in addition to wanting to see Tony's situation, he also brought some tentative intentions. Oh, how could it be a weapon? I'm just thinking about some new directions, such as the micro-arc reactor I mentioned to you, which may be finished soon. Hearing this, Obadiah's face suddenly flashed a trace of excitement, but then he hid it quietly. The scrapped armor seemed to lack some suitable energy on the chest. Now that Tony himself is about to research the finished product, he, as an uncle, will definitely get it firsthand. By then, maybe a batch of armored troops can be built based on the armor, and then the start group will gradually transfer the core to him. Obadiah calculated in his mind and began to speak in an official tone. A new direction. It sounds interesting, but, Tony, you have to know that what the company needs most now is. I know what the company needs. Tony interrupted him. But, Stan, should we reconsider the direction of the company's development, to provide prosthetic limbs for disabled soldiers or something? Hearing this, Obadiah frowned. Tony, are you still upset about the kidnapping? It was just an accident. We have strengthened security measures. Accident. Tony's tone suddenly became sharp. I saw the terrorists use our weapons with my own eyes. You call it an accident? Obadiah's expression became serious. Tony, you know, in this industry, sometimes there are some uncontrollable things that happen, but that doesn't mean we should give up the entire business. Tony, listen, I understand how you feel now. But you can't deny our achievements over the years because of an accident. Stark Industries is your father's hard work and the result of our joint efforts. Seeing Obadiah bring up his dead father, Tony was silent for a while, and then said, I believe, my father also doesn't want to see war. Isn't it better to close the weapons department once and for all? Okay, Tony, I know you need time to think carefully now. But before you make any major decisions, I hope you can think about it again. The company is at a critical period now, and we can't take risks. I understand. I'll think about it carefully. Tony nodded casually, picked up a cup of coffee and drank it carelessly, obviously not taking Obadiah's words to heart. Seeing this, Obadiah could only pat Tony on the shoulder in a fake manner and said, earnestly, That's good. By the way, Tony, the board of directors has been a little restless recently. You know, the company's stock price has been unstable since you came back. Why does this sound wrong? Isn't it you, Obadiah, who should interfere with this board of directors? Who the hell are you trying to hit? Tony frowned. I just went through something like that, and they messed with me like this. That's how business works, Tony. Obadiah shrugged. But I've tried my best to appease them. You just need to come up with something new before the next board meeting. Tony nodded, and his suspicions grew. Is there someone in the company doing some shady deals behind the scenes, or is it Obadiah who authorized it himself? But now his focus is not on these power struggles at all. As long as the mark armor is perfected, these things will naturally be shocked by the powerful strength. What is the old saying? The truth is only within the range of the cannon. Before absolute strength, all conspiracies and tricks are nothing. After sending Obadiah away, Tony returned to his basement. Just before going upstairs, he asked Jarvis to do a simulation test on the basic data of the armor in advance. Now, It is estimated that the data has been counted. Jarvis, what are the data results? Sir, the latest round of tests shows that the energy transmission efficiency has increased by 46% and the system stability has increased by 78%. Hearing this, Tony's tired face finally showed a smile of success. After studying the armor for more than half a month, he finally waited for the day when it could be started. Then Tony walked to the center of the laboratory and took a deep breath. Jarvis, start the assembly program. With Tony's order, the mechanical arm in the laboratory began to run at high speed. Precision armor parts were collected from all directions by the mechanical arm controlled by Jarvis and accurately assembled on Tony. Metal friction and electronic whistling sounded one after another. In less than a minute, a set of electroplated silver armor with cool luster and full of streamline covered Tony's whole body. Finally, the mask was closed, and the black space under Tony's head was instantly filled with a blue holographic projection panel. System check. Enable front display. Tony's voice came out through the armor speaker, with a hint of metallic texture. Enter personal preferences from the local interface. Sir, all systems are started normally, S-power output is stable, life support system is running well, and weapon system is on standby. Testing is complete, ready to shut down. Well, let's do this. Jarvis, check the weather and air traffic control and monitor ground control. Inside the armor, Tony took a deep breath, his face full of excitement. He couldn't wait to test the performance of the armor. If he really shut down, he would definitely not be able to sleep at night. He slowly rose into the air and hovered in the center of the laboratory. Every joint of the armor responded precisely to all movements. Sir, before we can actually fly, we need to calculate megabytes. Jarvis, sometimes you have to run before you can walk. Open the garage roof. As the roof slowly opened, what appeared in front of Tony was the runway leading from the garage to the outside world. However, it should be called a channel at this time. Tony's heart began to beat faster unconsciously, and he shouted in a suppressed voice. 3, 2, 1. Sir, I must remind you that this is the first field test. It is recommended to start at a low speed. Tony smiled. Jarvis, you should know my style. After that, he suddenly increased the output of the thrusters and rushed into the night sky like a silver lightning. Wow, Tony shouted, feeling the unprecedented freedom and the pleasure of flying up quickly, soaring freely in the clouds, and looking down slightly to overlook the brightly lit city below. Sir, the armor is performing well. All parameters are within normal range. Jarvis reported. Tony chuckled. Of course, but let's get a little exciting. What's the record for the State Route 71 reconnaissance aircraft? Sir, the fixed-wing flight altitude record is 8.5 feet. Look, Jarvis, records are meant to be broken. As he spoke, Tony's thrusters in both hands increased their output power, suddenly pulled up, and rushed straight into the sky. The altimeter rose rapidly and soon broke through the stratosphere. Tony saw the horizon began to bend, and the deep sky was in sight. Warning, sir, we are approaching the theoretical limit of the armor. Sir, there is potentially fatal icing on the outside of the armor. Hearing this, Tony did not give up the pull, but took a deep breath. Got it, Jarvis. Keep going, higher. As he continued to climb higher, Tony could feel the joints of his armor's limbs starting to stiffen, and the thrusters on his palms kept getting stuck. If this continued, it wouldn't be Tony Stark who broke the record today, but the strongest genius who died young. Jarvis, open the flaps. But just as the flaps were about to be opened, the holographic projection system inside the armor suddenly began to fail, and the HUD display screen flickered. While the reverse thrust stabilizer was increasing its power, Tony only felt a violent shaking, and then there was an emergency that almost scared him to death. The thruster actually shut down. Jarvis, Jarvis, Tony shouted, but Jarvis seemed to have crashed due to system overload, and the entire armor completely lost power. Tony only felt a moment of weightlessness, and then the whole person began to fall rapidly. Anyone who has jumped from a parachute in the sky knows that people have no sense of direction during a rapid fall. Professionals will try to make their bodies into a big character, increase the body's resistance to the air, and stabilize their body shape. If you don't stabilize it, you will become a beautiful meat paste, and no one may be willing to clean it up even if you give the cleaner $2,000. And Tony is now wearing a steel armor, and the gravitational potential energy is extremely exaggerated. With the acceleration, the fall is getting faster and faster. Tony tried to stay calm while tumbling and falling from the sky. He had installed an emergency plan for the system before. As long as he removed the ice on the outside of the armor, he could manually start the booster without Jarvis. Come on, come on. Looking at the rapidly expanding street scene in front of him, Tony muttered to himself, knocking the ice on the outside of the armor hard, while moving his fingers on the emergency switch inside the armor. Just when he was about to hit a high-rise building, the thruster finally restarted, and Tony barely avoided the building. But because he couldn't fully control the flight trajectory, Tony could only try his best to adjust his direction and rush straight to his garage. Due to the abnormal guidance, Tony flew directly to the roof of his villa and only needed to land steadily. It's so thrilling, worthy of the great Tony Stark. Ward. With a boom, the weight of the armor directly smashed Tony through the roof and fell hard on the sports car in his garage. The loud sound of metal collision echoed throughout the garage, the alarm sounded immediately, and the home fire extinguishing system was activated instantly. Foam sprayed out, soaking Tony, who was knocked unconscious. Lying on the smashed sports car, Tony took off his helmet, held his waist, and gasped. Jarvis, find me a new alloy material, and the problem of high-altitude icing. My old waist. Sir, do you need me to contact the medical care team for you? No, Jarvis. Hiss. Let me rest for a while. Tony supported the wall and limped out of the armor. At the same time, on the other side of New York, the Concept Technology Company building. Jonathan, who was very busy on the roof of the company, received a call from Dr. Stern. He told Jonathan that Dr. Banner could not find a way to suppress it in India, so he planned to come back to try his luck. It was just a last-ditch effort. And now, Dr. Banner had already set off from India yesterday, and it was estimated that he would be in New York in about an hour. Hulk, like Jonathan, could not fly, but his jumping height and speed were basically the same as flying. Since Jonathan rescued Tony, he has been waiting for Banner's information. Now, the news he wanted has finally arrived. Thinking of this, Jonathan said to a beautiful assistant next to him, "Prepare an inconspicuous car for me, and cancel all my schedules today." The beautiful assistant nodded, twisted her waist and left, and arranged the order. It is worth mentioning that this beauty is a highly educated assistant that Jonathan found 3 days ago. What is more coincidental is that she is also the biological sister of the female doctor Zhao Hailun who created the Cradle of Life, Zhao Haishuan. After sending the assistant away, Jonathan opened the electronic map and carefully examined the venue for the meeting with Dr. Banner. Dr. Banner turned into the Hulk and rushed all the way. The nearly 3-meter-tall green fat man was definitely a moving giant target, and it was impossible for people not to notice him. Therefore, conflicts were inevitable on the road, and the military's spies must have been following. Therefore, Jonathan needed to find a hidden place to meet with Dr. Banner, avoiding the military's spies and possible accidents. After repeated considerations, Jonathan finally chose an abandoned industrial park, where there were basically no people and almost no possibility of witnesses, but it was not too far from the city. After booking a seat, Jonathan sent the information to Dr. Stern and drove an ordinary car to the abandoned industrial park in Advanced District. Soon after, there was a commotion in the distance, and then Jonathan saw a thin figure cautiously rushing here. It seems Banner cancelled the transformation in advance. No wonder there is no real-time news about the green monster attack in the city. At the door of the abandoned factory, Banner, wrapped in a blanket from a street stall, vigilantly checked the surroundings, and then quickened his pace and walked into the factory. To be honest, it was extremely risky for him to rush back from India this time. Ever since he was irradiated by gamma rays, the green monster called Hulk in his body has messed up his life. Originally, his research was done well, but because of this, once he was angered by something, Hulk would break out of his body and humanely destroy any hostile creatures around him. And because Hulk was unarmed, he would find some handy weapons, so basically no place where Hulk had fought was good. So, the laboratory was naturally gone, the tanks that the military was chasing were gone, and his peaceful life was gone. Since then, Banner has made up his mind to get rid of Hulk. He went to India to find a master to learn meditation, but later found that it was useless. In the end, he could only put his lifeline on this, Dr. Blue. Anyway, with his Hulk fighting power, Banner really didn't worry that someone would use this to deceive him. If he couldn't fight, he could run away quickly. But after entering the abandoned factory, Banner's heart suddenly lifted up again, because he found that the person he met was not Dr. Blue, but an acquaintance he had never met before. I said acquaintance because his name, Playboy, had been published in the men's newspaper, and the young man who was suspected of turning good had also wanted to recruit him to work for a shell technology company. But there happened to be an accident that time, so he agreed to General Ross's recruitment and came to the military to help study gamma rays. Is it a coincidence, or was it premeditated? Thinking of this, Banner's eyes unconsciously flashed with a hint of green light. The green light flashing in Banner's eyes did not escape Jonathan's meticulous eyes, especially the huge green energy lurking in his body, which Jonathan could also feel. He came here today not to fight with Hulk. Whether he could beat him or not was another matter. The most important thing was to recruit Dr. Banner himself. Moreover, if Hulk was really provoked, the noise of the fight between the two would definitely be very loud, which would easily attract the attention of the military, and it would be difficult to end it at that time. Thinking of this, Jonathan raised his hands to Banner, who was slowly retreating, to indicate that he had no ill intentions. Dr. Banner, please calm down. I'm here on behalf of Dr. Blue. He is dealing with some urgent matters and cannot come in person. Hearing the name, Dr. Blue, Banner relaxed a little, but still remained vigilant. How do you prove that you are really here on behalf of Dr. Blue? And it's not a trap set by the military. Jonathan slowly took out a USB flash drive from his pocket and threw it to Banner. There is a video message from Dr. Blue to you, and some of his recent research results on you, you can check it out. Also, you may not know that Dr. Blue's real name is Samuel Stern, and he worked for me in my company a long time ago. You can say that I am his boss. Formally meet Jonathan Pierce, the current boss of Concept Technology. I once had the idea of recruiting you, Dr. Blue, but I didn't expect to encounter an accident. Banner nodded after hearing this, carefully took the USB flash drive, inserted it into his laptop, and checked it. After watching the video and the information, he finally let down his guard completely. I'm sorry, Mr. Pierce. I've been hunted for the past few months, so I'm inevitably a little suspicious. Jonathan smiled and shook his head. It's completely understandable. If it were me, I might be more cautious than you. So now, can we sit down and have a good chat? Banner wrapped the towel tightly and nodded. Things change. In the past, he was a scientific research expert with 7 doctoral degrees. Wherever he wanted to go, others had to look at his eyes. Unexpectedly, now only Jonathan, who was called Playboy, was willing to accept him and came all the way despite the danger. In any case, Banner remembered this favor. The two then sat down in a relatively clean corner of the abandoned factory. Jonathan got straight to the point. Dr. Banner, I know your current situation. I guess the military has been hunting you, and you have been looking for a way to control the Hulk. Our company has some new results from Dr. Stern's research, which may be helpful to you. But before that, I need to see if your body can withstand it. Before Banner could react, Jonathan put his hand on his shoulder. It was so fast that even Banner, who had been mentally strengthened by the Hulk, felt that there was nothing wrong. And this check was obviously made up by Jonathan on the spur of the moment, and he did have Dr. Stern's research results in his hands. But before that, he wanted to use the information query attached to reverse transcription itself to see if there was any room for conversion or extraction. When this hand touched, it popped up immediately. Transcribing meme identification. Identification successful. Meme. Angry personality derivative fission unlimited increase with anger power. Reverse transcription effect. 4 senses -1 joy, sorrow, and fear 3 illusion fusion unlimited increase with all 3 senses. Transcription conditions not met. Host size is insufficient. Defeat tie with the target character to unlock. Extraction temporarily sealed. Unlocked for 5 minutes. Sure enough, seeing this entry, Jonathan knew that it was just as he guessed. It was difficult to beat Hulk at this stage, at most it could barely be a 50-50 match. But this reverse transcribed entry is a bit against the sky. If he really unlocked this ability, then his potential for improvement would be far more terrifying than that of the Green Sorrow Hulk. As long as he has any one of joy, sorrow, and fear, then he can get unlimited potential for improvement of all qualities. As long as the emotions are enough, then he is theoretically invincible in Marvel. This is the real motherland. Why is the style getting more and more outrageous? Although this ability is extremely amazing, just imagine one of the scenes. You are laughing wildly while beating the enemy, or crying while fighting in battle, and you are getting bigger and stronger. How will this make your opponent feel? Crazier than the laughing bat, more amazing than the weeping She-Ra. As for fear, this is born to be the top adapter of the DC Yellow Lantern ring next door. This reverse transcription ability, no matter what, must be in your own hands. How is it? Is my body still okay? What kind of research results are there? Banner, who was looking forward to it, didn't know at this time that Jonathan, who was sitting next to him and was harmless, was already thinking about how to beat up the Hulk. Mr. Pierce. Oh, sorry for being distracted, just call me Jonathan. Jonathan came back to his senses and continued to explain. We have extracted an ingredient from plants. After combining this ingredient with our unique compound number 5, it can regulate the physiological state of the human body at the molecular level. In theory, it should be able to help you control your emotions in your body, thereby controlling the appearance of Hulk. After listening, Banner fell into deep thought. After a moment, he raised his head. It does sound promising, but I need to know more details. Has this technology been clinically tested? What are the side effects? When doing the gamma ray experiment before, General Ross promised that there would be absolutely no problem. I didn't expect that when I got into trouble, General Ross would be the first to defect. Didn't I just seduce his daughter Betty? We broke up a long time ago, and she was still staring at me. However, the red-haired female agent who came to India to find me some time ago didn't seem to be from the military. To be honest, there have been no human trials yet. Our research is still in its early stages. However, according to our simulation results, this technology should be safe. Of course, we fully understand your concerns. If you are willing, we can work together to improve this technology. Jonathan certainly didn't say everything. As long as he could get Banner to his side, it would be easy to create anything. As for Tony, the genius, although he rescued him from Afghanistan, he is not a professional researcher. It's okay to make a few requests as a friend, and now the two have not been in contact since he came back. Of course, Dr. Banner is the first choice. Hearing this, Banner nodded thoughtfully. This is indeed an attractive proposal. But I have another question. If this technology is really successful, what will your company do with it? I don't want it to fall into the hands of the military and become a new weapon. For Banner, the current military is the most disgusting, and he naturally doesn't want to give his future research results to the military. Oh, according to what Banner said, it's obviously a play. So Jonathan hurriedly said seriously, Dr. Banner, I promise you, we will never use this technology for weapons research and development. If you want, we can sign a legal agreement that clearly stipulates that this technology can only be used for medical purposes. After listening to this, Banner's eyes flashed with satisfaction. This sounds good. I agreed. So, am I considered a member now? The military outside is probably still looking for me. Banner is considered one of his own if he joins the company, so Jonathan decided to take him to a safe house first, and wait for the outside storm to pass before letting Banner settle in his company. And this safe house was specially approved by his cheap father before he left. Nick Fury's safe house may not be safe enough. Hydra is an expert in hiding. He may not know that someone is inside the safe house for his whole life. About half an hour later, Jonathan brought him to an apartment building that looked very good. Jonathan explained, this is one of my safe houses. Except for some of my acquaintances, basically no one knows about it, and no one will bother you. In addition, there are special mechanisms inside. There is a secret door in the closet. Through it, you can reach an underground laboratory. Doctor, you can take a rest here temporarily and wait for the storm to pass. The two entered the apartment, and Banner looked around. It was found that the camouflage effect of this apartment was indeed like an ordinary residential house. Although the area was not large, it was fully equipped. He could live here when he came out of the laboratory. Jonathan took Banner to the closet and found a switch disguised as a hanger in an inconspicuous corner. He demonstrated it to Banner with a special swing frequency to open the secret door inside. As he walked down the stairs, the lights inside gradually lit up, and soon a medium-sized laboratory appeared in front of Banner. "Doctor, I know you are a researcher, so I specially prepared these equipment. If you want to continue your research, you can use it at any time. And don't worry, there are reinforced steel doors on all sides here. Once Hulk gets out of control, I can also receive an alarm and rush over in time." Hearing that Jonathan was so well prepared, Banner nodded gratefully. He didn't expect that a playboy would not dislike the trouble on him and was so enthusiastic. Banner decided to participate in Jonathan's research and see if he could help do something, which was also a repayment of this favor. "Thank you, Jonathan. You really helped me a lot." Jonathan waved his hand casually. "You're welcome. As a boss, you can't treat your employees badly, let alone a great man like you." Then the two sat down first, and Banner couldn't wait to ask Jonathan about the technology in his hands. Seeing this, Jonathan pretended to take out a bottle of black tubular injection from his pocket, but actually took out a bottle of black tubular injection from the system space. In fact, this world seems very big, but the connection between things is very wonderful. For example, this so-called plant turned out to be something that Dr. Stern got from somewhere. Heart-shaped grass, from the heart-shaped grass of the Black Panther. Some people may not know this thing. It is produced in Wakanda, an African country that is extremely poor. After eating this plant, the sensory and physical properties will be greatly improved, similar to the super soldier serum of the old American popsicle, and it has a dream effect. This effect can see various ancestors in the illusion, and talk with them, rest in the soil, according to their customs, and finally achieve strengthening. And this effect was also specially separated by Dr. Stern, and the mental influence attribute was combined with the active properties of compound number 5. This tube of drug that can calm the mind was finally synthesized. Therefore, Jonathan called it chilling, with a sense of humor. This effect is not like ordinary sedatives. It can even calm a person's mind to the point of nothing outside the mind. At this time, even if you put a peerless beauty in front of Banner, he may not even think of looking at her. During this period, Dr. Banner can only be wrong. However, Banner did not know the truth. Out of trust in Jonathan, he asked him to leave the basement first, fearing that how the mutation hurt him, and then a needle pierced his arm. Hiss. The hardness of the needle was beyond imagination. Banner's face flashed a trace of anger unnaturally, and then his whole body had a phenomenon of blue veins popping out and his face turned green. Just as Banner's muscles were about to swell, the black liquid was also injected into his body. It was an extreme coolness. Once it entered the body, it began to spread in his sympathetic nerves like ice mist. 1 second, 2 seconds. Banner's green quickly faded, and his eyes regained clarity. Finally, suppressed. Maybe Banner himself didn't realize that he had no excitement at all, but just spoke in a plain way, and even the anxiety that had been following him all the time didn't feel anything at this time. Very good. State numbness. Banner now has only a faint joy, but this does not prevent him from being grateful to Jonathan. Maybe he can do something to repay him. And at this moment, Jonathan's cell phone suddenly rang in the stairwell. He looked at the caller ID and his face became a little strange. When did my cheap dad have so much free time to call me during working hours? Hello, Jonathan, did you take Dr. Banner to the safe house? Yes, he just arrived. What's wrong? Your dad has tried his best. I don't know why, but General Ross of the military has suspected you of Dr. Banner's disappearance. He is now talking to Nick Fury in S.H.I.E.L.D. So, Nick Fury knows it now. This is not the point. The most important thing is that Nick Fury has helped you temporarily suppress General Ross, but he will find you sooner or later. It is not a wise choice to go against the military at this stage. There's no need to be hostile to the military because of one person. Got it, Dad. Let me handle this matter. A few minutes later, Jonathan came to Dr. Banner and said apologetically, Dr. Banner, I'm sorry, but I have to leave immediately. There are some emergencies in the company that need my attention. I may be absent for a while. Oh, it's okay. You go ahead. I'll study here for a while. After Banner agreed, Jonathan left in a hurry. Before leaving, he did not forget to ask the Hydra agents lurking around to help keep an eye on him. But he didn't know that after being strengthened by the second personality of Hulk, Banner's own 5 senses were also strengthened. So he heard the conversation between Jonathan and Pierce clearly. Thinking of the content of the conversation, Banner, who looked indifferent, suddenly had a trace of struggle in his eyes, and then he picked up the luggage he had just packed, walked out of the laboratory and returned to the top. At the same time, Obadiah walked into Tony's villa again. Chapter 91. Yesterday was Tony's birthday party. But he was depressed and found that, for some reason, a lot of celebrities suddenly came to his low-key party. Out of basic courtesy, he had to drag his tired body to greet them. At the party, Tony was in a bad mood. After dancing with Pepper, he went to the side to drink cocktails. Unexpectedly, a female reporter named Christine found him and handed him a photo. Originally, Tony was not very interested in this former friend of weapons. Unexpectedly, the female reporter told him that the photo showed Comila. However, the photo showed a large area of ruins after the bombing, with corpses everywhere, and, in addition, the weapons used in the photo were almost all products of Stark Industries. And Tony was very familiar with the word Comila, because Comila was Ethan's home. At that time, after being rescued, Ethan did not choose to accept Tony's luxury house and sports car, but chose to return to his hometown Comila for reconstruction. A few days ago, Tony was still in contact with Ethan, but in these few days, he found that he could no longer contact Ethan. At this time, even a fool would know that Ethan must have met with an accident. After that, Tony went to Obadiah to question him, and he got only one answer, that is, Obadiah personally issued a ban on him, under the euphemism of protection. Now, Tony had to suspect that the initiator of all this was the uncle who watched him grow up. The protagonist butterfly effect. The plot has changed, and it is not written according to the original plot. Therefore, Tony, who was angry but still intelligent, asked Pepper to go to Obadiah's office to check the information, but he didn't expect to be caught by Obadiah. So, after Pepper left, Obadiah went straight to Tony's villa. Of course, Tony didn't know what happened at this time, and was still perfecting the Mark III in the basement. Jarvis, call up the latest design drawings. Tony rubbed his still aching back and said to the air. Okay, sir. Jarvis' voice sounded, and then a holographic projection appeared in front of Tony, showing the detailed design drawings of the gold, red and silver battle suit. To solve the problem of high-altitude icing, maybe a special coating can be applied to the outer layer, or a de-icing system can be installed. Quote. Jarvis, I'm asking you a question. Sir, Obadiah Stan is visiting. Jarvis' voice rang out in the room. Why is he here at this time? Hearing this sudden news, Tony frowned. He just gave me a cold look yesterday. He definitely didn't come to ask me about my well-being. Could it be Pepper was discovered? The more he thought about it, the weirder it felt, but Tony didn't want to tear his face with Obadiah yet, so he changed into a suit and walked into the front hall with a smile on his face. Let him in, Tony said, sitting up on the sofa. After a while, Obadiah walked in. His bald head shone in the sun, and the kind smile that always hung on his face was gone, replaced by a cold expression that Tony had never seen before. Hey, Stan, Tony greeted casually and waved the wine glass in his hand. Want something to drink? Good stuff just shipped from Scotland. Obadiah did not answer, but walked slowly closer. His eyes made Tony feel a little uneasy, and the atmosphere in the room suddenly became stalemate at this time. At this time, Tony received a call from Pepper. Without hesitation, Tony picked up the phone and put it to his ear. At the same time, Obadiah quickly pressed a button. Then Tony's phone was vibrated with a harsh sound wave of unknown frequency, which paralyzed Tony's whole body, as if countless needles were piercing his nerves at the same time, and his face was densely covered with dark green veins. His body instantly lost control and collapsed on the sofa. You know, Tony. Helping Tony's stiff body to the back of the sofa, Obadiah finally spoke, his voice low, as if a demon was whispering in his ear. Breathe, relax. You know, Tony, I was by your father's side when he founded this company. I know, you have always been an important pillar of the company. Tony said incoherently because of paralysis. Pillar. Obadiah sneered, and this laugh contained too many emotions that Tony could not understand: resentment, jealousy, anger. Pillar. No, Tony, I have always been a shadow, the manipulator behind the scenes, but why? Why do you do this? Tony squeezed out this sentence with difficulty, and every word seemed to exhaust his whole body. Obadiah looked down at the paralyzed Tony, his eyes flashing with ambition and resentment, his expression twisted, as if years of disguise finally peeled off at this moment. Why? Because you wasted the potential of Stark Industries, Tony. You have such powerful technology, but you think about peace. What the world needs is power and control. Tony tried to stay awake, his brain running fast. He finally realized that the man in front of him had always been a disguise. Including his own attack in Afghanistan, it was probably the work of this good uncle. You were wrong. Weapons will only bring more death and destruction. We have the responsibility to change all this. That's your problem, Tony. Obadiah looked down, his tone full of contempt for Tony's naivety. You are too idealistic. In this world, only the strong can survive. And I will make Stark Industries the most powerful existence. Your peace theory will only make us lose the market and influence. Quote. Speaking, Obadiah reached out and touched the arc reactor on Tony's chest, with a greedy light in his eyes. Ah, your heart. What a great invention, Tony. When I sent people to kill you, I was still worried about losing a golden goose that lays eggs. Unexpectedly, you left me a legacy. Quote. Okay, the time for talking is over, Tony. Now it's time to act. You are just a threat, an obstacle that needs to be removed. Quote. Obadiah took out a mechanical device and slowly took out the reactor from Tony's chest, admiring the energy source emitting blue light in his hand. The energy link was disconnected, and Tony instantly felt that his life was passing quickly, and breathing became more and more difficult. His vision began to blur and his consciousness gradually dissipated. Don't worry, I will make good use of it. Quote. Obadiah turned and walked towards the door, his footsteps sounded like the death knell in Tony's ears. Goodbye, Tony. I will tell everyone that the great Tony Stark died in an accident. What a sad story, isn't it? The door slammed shut, leaving Tony lying alone in the luxurious living room. Ironically, he was trapped in his wealth and achievements, but unable to save himself. Once, he thought that money and technology could solve all problems, but at this moment, all of these became meaningless. Tony's breathing became more and more rapid. Obadiah tore his face. Then Pepper must still be in his hands. With his ruthless means, Pepper must also be. No, it can't end like this. Tony shouted in his heart, and then tried his best to get up and move towards the assembly table, but he found that with his current strength, it seemed that there was still some distance to go. 3 meters, like a natural chasm. There was Pepper's birthday gift for him, a reframed first-generation miniature arc reactor. But, as his eyelids drooped, Tony, who was lying on the ground, found that he couldn't seem to reach the stage. His whole body's thinking became slow. Am I going to die? But I'm not willing to accept it. Squeak. A cute, faint mechanical sound suddenly came from beside Tony. It turned out to be Ben, the mechanical arm that often made him angry and complained, and at this moment, it just happened to be holding his reactor in its claws. Very good. I have decided to take back my decision to give you to the Imperial University for free. Fortunately, this glass is not made in the East. Bang. Quote. Speaking of this, Tony poured all his strength into his hands, grabbed the glass box and threw it to the ground. At the same time, on the other side of New York, Jonathan also met the famous Hulk, Licker, General Ross, under Pierce's avoidance. I'll ask you one last time, where is Dr. Banner? General Ross questioned aggressively, his eyes sharp like a falcon, exuding the power of a long life in power. This power may be useful for college students with clear eyes, but it's nothing against Jonathan. There's nothing else. As a cannon fodder general in an independent movie, it's like watching a supporting role in a TV series. No matter how much you call him, it can't change the fact that he is about to die. What? You said he is the Red Hulk. He is about to get a new power, and the Hulk can be beaten. What the hell is he? So Jonathan answered casually with a nonchalant look on his face. Oh, General, I'm not used to your serious face. I really don't know the whereabouts of Dr. Banner. If you know, you can tell me. Don't play this trick on me. General Ross slammed the table and stood up, and the whole room was shaken by the sudden noise. You once wanted to recruit him, but he disappeared after he fled back to New York. From the time the incident happened until now, you are the only person he has contacted. How could you not know his whereabouts? General, this table is made of golden nanmu. It would be bad if it was damaged. But then again, General, what do you say? It seems that you are the one who has been in contact with him. You just rely on an ordinary interpersonal relationship to pull the matter to my head. Then the neighbor Wong stole your clothes. Does it also mean that your wife cheated on you? Jonathan waved his hand with a strange look on his face. Are you right, sharp-tongued? Are you deliberately hiding something? General Ross sneered. Besides, are you implying that I'm hurting him? We just want to control that monster so that he won't pose a threat to the public. When there's a bear in the crowd, don't we shoot it? Control. Jonathan felt a little funny. He found that this old American general was even more shameless than the city wall. He couldn't help but ask back. So you put him in a cage and study him like a test subject. So he can't resist, right? I have to cooperate with you. I'll lock you in the toilet and eat buffet for a year. Are you willing? Hearing this, General Ross's face suddenly darkened. Please pay attention to your words, young man. You may not understand the seriousness of the situation. Dr. Banner is now a potential national security threat. We must take action. Oh, then please tell me, General, you should take action. Jonathan looked directly into General Ross's eyes. I said, you came to my house without evidence, without a search warrant, and disturbed my sleep so early in the morning. If you want to take action, then go and set up defenses, and stay in my home, a 5-star good citizen. Is your military so idle at ordinary times? I pay so much tax every year and pay it to dogs. The atmosphere in the room froze instantly. General Ross is worthy of being the adapter of the Red Giant, and his face was so angry that it turned red. Are you questioning the decision of the military? General Ross gritted his teeth and said, Boy, do you know you are playing with fire? At this tense moment, an officer hurried into the room and broke the simple cosplay meeting. General, urgent report, the officer said breathlessly. We found the trace of Dr. Banner. Hearing the news of his sweetheart, General Ross's attention was instantly diverted, and a glimmer of excitement flashed in his eyes. He glanced at Jonathan at last, his eyes full of warning. Boy, don't let me catch you. After saying that, he followed the officer out of the room with big strides and hurried to date Banner. At this time, in the basement of the big villa on the other side, Tony put the first-generation arc reactor into his chest with difficulty, holding his breath, and a warm current instantly flowed through his body. He took a deep breath and felt the vitality flowing into every cell again. Really, I'm lucky. After lying on the ground for a while, Tony spoke to the air. Jarvis, prepare the armoring procedure for Mark III for me. Tony ordered without question. Pepper is still in a dangerous state. He has to go to save people quickly. But sir, Mark III has not completed comprehensive testing yet, and there may be unstable factors. Moreover, with the energy scheduling of the first-generation arc reactor, it is not suitable for flying. Jarvis said. No time. Tony stood in the center of the disk and interrupted. According to Obadiah's usual behavior, he will definitely take my arc. Manufacturing armor, maybe he has already made it through the closed weapons department. He must be stopped, otherwise the consequences will be disastrous. Quote. Understood, sir. Starting the assembly program. Following the order, Jarvis started the assembly program of Mark III. In an instant, the floor under Tony's feet rippled like a ripple, revealing the precision mechanical arms hidden underneath. Under the startup program, a series of mechanical arms stretched out quickly from the dark in an orderly manner, and each piece-picking action was extremely precise. 2 mechanical discs lifted Tony's feet and fixed them firmly. Then, after the installation program arranged by Jarvis, more mechanical arms began regional assembly, accurately placing the gold and red armor parts on Tony one by one. Starting from the feet, the armor was like a layer of flowing metal, winding up along Tony's legs. Each piece of armor fits Tony's body curve perfectly, revealing the metal's smooth texture. After the leg armor was installed, the waist and torso armor followed suit, and the precise gears and joints made a slight click sound. The armor covered the chest, and the armor parts around the reactor seemed to wrap the reactor tightly. The blue light passed through the special energy conduit and instantly lit up the whole set of armor. Finally, the helmet slowly lowered. When the visor and the main body of the helmet fit perfectly, two white lights burst out from the eyes. The whole set of Mark III armor was put on, and it was completed. Very good. Tony slowly clenched his fist in the armor, and the armor made a slight mechanical sound, and the movements were perfectly synchronized. The system is fully started, the weapon system is preset successfully, and the flight system is ready. Jarvis's voice sounded in his ears. I wish you a triumphant return, sir. Tony took a deep breath, and the holographic projection display screen in the visor lit up instantly, and various data slid through like flowing water. It's time to teach our good uncle a lesson. Quote. After that, Tony started the thrusters. Instantly, bright white air gushed out from his palms and soles, and Tony turned into a red light and flew out of the skylight of the villa, cutting through the night sky and heading straight for the headquarters of Stark Industries. At this time, Banner was carrying his luggage and got into a taxi. Now that Hulk had been temporarily suppressed, he would really feel bad if Jonathan was affected by this incident. Therefore, he chose to flee New York again, and then come back to New York to work for Jonathan after Hulk was completely stable. However, ideals are often inferior to the harsh reality. At this moment, following Banner's taxi, there were two military armored vehicles, and the surrounding residents were being driven by some soldiers to clear the block. Coincidentally, the direction Banner's taxi was heading was very close to the headquarters of Stark Industries. Evening. Pepper and Agent Coulson walked carefully in the dark corridor of the abandoned Stark Industries weapons headquarters. There was silence all around, and only their footsteps echoed in the whole space. The atmosphere was really scary. Agent Coulson, are you sure this is the right direction? Pepper asked in a low voice, her eyes vigilantly scanning the surroundings, fearing that something would suddenly jump out and offer a big gift. Coulson nodded. According to our intelligence, Obadiah has been frequently in and out of this closed weapons department recently. If there is any illegal activity, there must be some traces left. Soon, the two came to a heavy metal door and found a sign hanging on the door saying, Heavy Industry Area, no entry. Now that we're here, although she felt a little scared, Pepper still took a deep breath and chose to reach out and push the door open. Squeak. Inside the door was a huge warehouse, with various parts and semi-finished products scattered everywhere, and dim emergency lights flashing, adding a bit of weirdness to the entire space. Oh my God, Pepper exclaimed. This looks like a secret factory. Coulson carefully observed the surrounding equipment. Indeed, these machines are obviously used to make large weapons. Ms. Potts, does Mr. Stark know about this? Pepper shook her head. With Tony's delicate personality, he wouldn't go to great lengths to do these things. He has a strong self-esteem and would only work alone in the basement. In fact, I don't think Tony knows. This must have been done by Obadiah behind his back. He hasn't been to the weapons department for a long time. There were no clues here, so the two continued to go deeper into the warehouse. Suddenly, Pepper stopped and pointed forward. Look there, in the center of the warehouse, a huge metal frame stood quietly. Although it was not yet completed, it could be seen that this was a suit of armor that was much larger than Tony's. However, this suit looked more like an abandoned semi-finished product. Is this Obadiah's secret plan? Coulson frowned. Could it be that he wants to make a super armor? Boom, boom, boom. Just then, all the lights in the warehouse suddenly lit up, and the dazzling light made the two people squint their eyes and block the light with their hands. It seems that the guess was right. I knew someone would come to disturb my good thing. A deep voice suddenly sounded behind the two. Chili and Coulson turned around suddenly, only to see Obadiah standing not far behind them, with a hideous smile on his face and a controller of something in his hand. Stan, what do you want to do? Chili asked sharply. Obadiah adjusted his suit and sneered. What? Of course, I want to take back everything that belongs to me. Tony, that ignorant kid, actually wants to close the weapons department and destroy our hard work. I can't allow this to happen. Seeing this, Coulson immediately stepped forward and took out his ID. Mr. Stan, I suggest you stop all illegal activities now. As long as you are willing to go back with us to accept the investigation now, the charge of illegal manufacturing of weapons can be dropped. Investigation. Obadiah suddenly laughed. I am dying of laughter. Who do you think you are? A small government pawn wants to take care of my business. As he said, he pressed the remote control in his hand. Suddenly, the giant armor behind him began to make a buzzing sound, and the various parts began to assemble automatically. Seeing Obadiah's actions, Pepper and Coulson quickly realized that the situation was not good, and turned around to run away. However, Obadiah was prepared and pressed another button, and the door of the warehouse began to slowly close. Ha ha, you can't go anywhere, Obadiah grinned. The giant armor has been assembled, and Obadiah controls the mecha to rush forward and grab the two. At this time, the security team led by Coulson also began to fight back. However, bullets alone can't cause any damage to the thickened armor, and the Iron Overlord mecha controlled by Obadiah is unexpectedly flexible, and a few flashes threw the following team members away. Fortunately, although Pepper is wearing high heels, she still walks fast, followed by Coulson, and the two rushed out at the moment when the warehouse door was about to close. The exasperated Obadiah, seeing that the two wanted to escape, Obadiah hurriedly chased after them, but the armor was too big to pass through, so he could only angrily leave a few fist marks on the door. Ha, that was close, Agent Coulson, we have to find a way to hold him back, the impact will be even greater when we get to the city outside. Pepper panted, and her foot in high heels almost sprained. Coulson nodded his sparsely haired head and took out his gun. I'll try my best, but facing this kind of armor, our weapons may not be of much use. And at this moment, a big hole suddenly appeared in the ground behind Pepper. A closer look showed that it was not the effect of a shell explosion. Obadiah manipulated the armor to tear the ground apart, and then rushed out from it. The huge weight hit the ground, almost making Pepper and Coulson lose their balance. Where do you want to go? Pepper, I didn't intend to kill you. But what you did today really chilled me. Obadiah's voice came through the loudspeaker of the armor, sounding even colder and more terrifying. Pepper and Coulson took a few steps back at the same time, but were soon cornered. Don't be like this, Stan. Pepper tried to persuade him. You still have a chance to turn back. Tony will understand you. Understand? Obadiah sneered. I don't need anyone's understanding. When I get the technology to truly master the arc reactor and mass-produce the armor, then the whole world will crawl at my feet. As he said, he raised his arm and aimed at Pepper and Coulson. The weapon system in the palm of his hand began to charge, making a harsh buzzing sound. And at this critical moment, a whistling sound of wind came from the air, and a red and gold figure fell from the sky, hitting Obadiah and the two of them heavily. The smoke and dust cleared, and Tony Stark stood there in the gold, red and silver Mark III armor. Has the party started? I don't want to miss it. Tony's voice came through the visor. Tony, Pepper shouted in surprise. Tony turned his head and looked at Pepper and Coulson. Are you okay? Get out of here, I'll deal with him. Coulson had a clear understanding of his own strength, and staying here would only cause trouble. So he nodded, pulled Pepper and ran towards the exit. Tony, you are so lucky. Let's see whose armor is better. Tony took a fighting stance, and the palm cannons in both hands locked onto the chest of the Iron Overlord armor. Stan, I can't believe you would do such a thing. But since you insist on fighting, come on. As soon as the voice fell, the two armors rushed towards each other in an instant, and the whole warehouse was suddenly plunged into a melee. Although Obadiah's Iron Overlord armor was huge, his movements were surprisingly flexible. He swung his huge fist and punched Tony. Tony, with his more flexible body, kept dodging the attacks. Jarvis, analyze the weaknesses of his armor. Tony gave orders while dodging. Analyzing, sir. Jarvis' voice sounded in his ears. Preliminary judgment is that although his armor has strong defense, the power system seems to be unstable. Tony nodded after hearing it. I see, then focus on his joints. Tony started the thrusters and quickly pulled away. He raised his hands, and the laser cannons in his palms began to charge. Hey, Stan, Tony shouted. Try this. Two powerful energy beams shot out from Tony's palms in an instant, accurately hitting the knee joints of Obadiah's armor. The huge impact force made Obadiah stagger and almost fall. Obadiah cursed. "Do you think this can defeat me?" He raised his arm, and the shoulder armor suddenly opened, revealing a row of small missiles, whizzing towards Tony. Seeing this, Tony quickly activated the anti-missile system and quickly moved to avoid it. Explosions came one after another, and the entire warehouse was instantly shrouded in smoke. Taking advantage of the cover of the smoke, Obadiah suddenly rushed out, grabbed Tony's legs, and then threw Tony hard to the ground. There was a loud bang, and Tony felt that he was shocked. "Sir, the armor is damaged by 20%. Jarvis reported. Tony gritted his teeth and climbed up. "It doesn't matter, I can still fight." "How is it, Tony? My armor is much more perfect than yours." Obadiah laughed and approached, with disdain and contempt under the mask. "Oh, really? Then have you ever tried it?" Speaking of this, Tony suddenly activated the thrusters and rushed directly towards Obadiah. At the moment of collision, he suddenly turned sideways and accurately grabbed an interface on the back of Obadiah's armor. This line seems to be very important. Tony aimed his eyes at a line, grabbed it with one hand without hesitation, and then charged the palm laser cannon to destroy it. Zilla. Some electric light appeared, and Obadiah found that the locking system on his face began to malfunction. So he grabbed Tony's body on his shoulders, squeezed it tightly, and then threw Tony out with a flick of his hand. Tony, who flew out, used the thrusters to stabilize his body in midair, and then ordered Jarvis. "Jarvis, gather energy in your chest. Sir, you still have 21% of your energy left. Firing energy beams will consume a lot of energy and may cause the armor to stop working. Do as I say, Jarvis." "Okay, sir." Quote. The next thicker beam burst out from Tony's chest reactor, directly knocking Ironmonger several meters away. Some parts of the armor disintegrated, but this damage was only a superficial injury to the extremely defensive Ironmonger. So, when the smoke cleared, Tony was surprised to find that Ironmonger was almost unscathed. "What fake? How can this skin be so thick?" "Oh, is that all you can do, Tony?" Obadiah laughed. "It seems that our genius has not made much progress. How about taking a look at mine?" Ironmonger suddenly stretched out his hand, and a powerful electromagnetic pulse hit Tony from his palm. At this moment, the Mark III system suddenly became temporarily disordered. "Warning, the system is subject to electromagnetic interference and is restarting." Quote. In the armor, Jarvis' voice was intermittent. Tony, who was suspended in the air at this time, felt that he was falling. Just when he was about to hit the ground, the system finally returned to normal. "System restart completed, sir," Jarvis reported. Tony pulled up suddenly and barely avoided close contact with the ground. But before he could breathe a sigh of relief, Iron Man's giant hand had grabbed him. "Game over, Tony." Obadiah grinned. "Good idea, but my armor has been improved. I have all the functions you don't have, and it's more perfect." Quote. Ironmonger's hand began to tighten. As the armor tightened, Tony felt that his ribs were overwhelmed. If he couldn't find a way to escape, he would really be crushed by Obadiah. Just at this critical moment, Tony suddenly thought of a crazy idea. "Didn't they say that the armor is perfect? Then try this. The problem of high-altitude icing. Obadiah probably hasn't tried it, right? Jarvis, start the thrusters at full power." "Sir, doing this may cause the system to overload." "Just do it." Quote. Just when Tony was about to fly high into the sky, the dynamic vision capture system in his armor suddenly discovered a suspected person jumping towards him at a high speed. I say person, because half of this person's face is green, and his body is very asymmetrical, and only one side is strong. And the way he came here is to step on the roof, and he can jump 10 meters with a big jump. You know, the height here is no less than 3 floors. Who lickseat? What kind of person has such physical fitness? Just as Tony was about to start the thrusters, his visual system captured an unusual figure approaching at an alarming speed. "Jarvis, what the hell is that?" Because he was caught in the air by Obadiah, Tony asked in a low voice in the communication system unnaturally. "According to the database comparison, sir, it should be a human." Jarvis replied. "But his condition doesn't seem normal. Is it cosplay?" Tony was happy to see it, so Obadiah would naturally notice this uninvited guest at this time. However, his reaction was obviously different from Tony's, because the expansion and confidence given to him by the Iron Overlord armor made him look down on everything. Even Tony, a genius, could be suppressed under his feet, so what was he afraid of for an ordinary person? So, without any hesitation, he directly activated the missile system on the Iron Overlord armor. A small but powerful missile whizzed towards the person. No, stop, this is a real person, Tony shouted, but it was too late. The missile drew a parabola in the air and hit Banner, who was hiding from the military not far away. Instantly, the explosion was deafening, the flames shot up to the sky, and the thick smoke instantly enveloped the area. Seeing this, Tony's heart sank. This is the missile he made himself. Doesn't he know what power it is? This man's head is probably blown off. However, when the smoke dissipated a little, Tony and Obadiah were stunned. Because Banner not far away was not only unharmed, but also half of his body seemed to have become bigger. The most amazing thing is that Banner's face, which was originally half green, has now been forgiven. Just half an hour ago, Banner, who was still in the taxi, suddenly noticed something wrong. In a calm state, his brain worked extremely fast, and he even thought of a plan to make a drug to stabilize Hulk in the future. But just when he was not paying attention, the armored vehicle in the rearview mirror was exposed to his field of vision through the rearview mirror of the taxi. So, Banner chose to let the driver drive around casually to test it. Unexpectedly, just by trying it casually, Banner really found that he was being followed. So he asked the driver to stop quickly in a small alley, and he didn't care about his luggage, closed the door and rushed out. The armored car following behind naturally noticed that something was wrong with Banner, so he got off the car and followed the direction where Banner disappeared. So it became like this: Banner escaped and the soldiers chased. For some reason, when Banner was in a calm state, it was difficult to mobilize the anger in his body. Therefore, in order to maximize the possibility of escape, Banner chose to take the initiative to greet a bullet with his body. The fact is, just as Banner guessed, the huge pain directly activated the dormant Hulk in his body. However, Banner found that Hulk seemed to be only activated half. This half, only half of the body has been expanded and strengthened exclusively by Hulk. In short, Banner now has some of Hulk's abilities, and there is also a unicorn arm attached. The original calm state began to compete for the dominance of the first personality because of the resurrection of Hulk, which also caused Banner to fall directly into a semi-conscious and semi-crazy mental state. Obadiah's shell just happened to hit Banner, who was unconscious, and just blew out Hulk's dominance. Roar! With a thunderous roar that resounded throughout the battlefield, Banner's left half of the body began to expand rapidly, and soon became as huge as the right side. The eyes that were originally glowing green turned into pure green, and the pupils expanded without any warning. The Hulk leapt up and rushed directly towards Obadiah, the provocateur. But the complacent Obadiah didn't take the little Karami Hulk seriously at all, and quickly made a clown judgment. He saw the arrival of the military personnel behind Hulk and thought it was a great opportunity to show his strength. In his opinion, no matter where this monster came from, if he could subdue this out-of-control monster, then the military would definitely be interested in his technology. There are definitely many people looking for him to cooperate, and the opportunity to monopolize the army is just around the corner. Then we have to seize it. Watch it, Tony. Thinking of this, Obadiah shouted arrogantly. Let you see what real power is. As he said, he jumped up and drove the Ironmonger armor towards the Hulk. However, he soon found out how small his decision was. Ugly. He seriously underestimated the power of the Hulk. To be more precise, the Hulk had weakened most of his power. But with just these powers, the Hulk was enough to beat Obadiah. He just turned around casually and grabbed Ironmonger's arm lightly. In the mask, Obadiah could see the ferocious green face of the Hulk. The face of flesh showed that this was not an object that could be easily controlled. So, the regretful Obadiah tried to start the front thrusters to escape, but the speed of the Hulk was amazing. Before he could react, a huge green palm grabbed Ironmonger's leg directly, and then smashed Obadiah to the ground like a toy. This exclusive treatment of Loki was now also experienced by Obadiah. With a loud bang, a big pit was smashed directly on the ground, and dust flew. Although the armor was thick enough, the force was mutual, and the armor was not equipped with a shock absorber, so Obadiah could only groan in pain inside the armor, and various alarms began to sound in his ears. Seeing this, Tony quickly started the thrusters and flew into the air. Although Obadiah's matter had touched his reverse scale, Tony's attitude towards him was to kill him, but he still had some questions to ask Obadiah, so he naturally couldn't kill this green monster at will. He didn't know Ethan's condition yet. So, Tony shouted very sincerely to the nearly 3-meter tall Hulk. "Hey, big guy, calm down, we can talk." However, the Hulk had lost his mind at this time and couldn't distinguish between the enemy and us. He roared at Tony in the air, and then pulled up a steel pipe thicker than a human head and threw it at Tony like a javelin. Seeing this, Tony increased the power of the thrusters and narrowly avoided the deadly missile. But before he could breathe a sigh of relief, the Hulk had already jumped into the air and punched him. Tony barely activated the defense system to cushion the impact, but the huge impact still knocked him to the ground. "Warning, sir, the armor is damaged by 45%. Jarvis's voice rang in Tony's ears. "Got it. As long as you can still fight." Tony climbed up with difficulty and saw that the Hulk had turned to other targets. The surrounding buildings became the objects of his venting anger, and bricks and glass flew everywhere. At this time, not far away, the military reinforcements had arrived. A large number of armed soldiers on the armored vehicles began to fire at the Hulk on the roof, and there were even 2 tanks following the armored vehicles. However, these attacks were like tickling to the Hulk's super-tight muscle tissue, and they could not break through the defense at all. A large number of bullets bounced off his skin, leaving no bullet marks, and the bombardment of the shells could only injure the surface of the body. The Hulk was a little irritated by these baptisms, so he roared, jumped up, and landed directly on a tank. Crack! The sound of metal deformation was extremely harsh, and half of the front of the tank had a visible deformation, and the soldiers inside had not had time to escape before they turned into a mosaic structure. Then, the Hulk felt that it was not enough, so he grabbed the gun barrel with one hand and began to tear it vigorously. However, after the Hulk's strength was weakened, he seemed a little powerless. For some reason, the Hulk could only be powerless and furious, and continued to smash around with his 2 huge fists. Because the Hulk's movements were more flexible and the incidental damage was huge, a large number of soldiers were blown away before they had time to shoot. All the broken car parts around were used as weapons by Hulk, and the besieged on all sides situation was turned into a chaos. The scene was one-sided, but most of the soldiers who did not shoot were spared by Hulk, but those who really hurt him, Hulk. Seeing the noise made by the Hulk, Tony, who was smart, found that the Hulk deliberately held back, so he flew into the air again and shouted to the attacking military. "Stop, your attack will only make the situation worse." Hearing the shout, General Ross, as the commander, snorted disdainfully, and ignored Tony's Iron Man shouting, and continued to order to open fire. At this time, Obadiah, who had recovered his vitality, suddenly climbed out of the ruins. His Iron Overlord armor was very thick and was not seriously damaged. Looking at General Ross in the distance, he seemed to see an opportunity. "You know, it's not just the terrorists like the 10 Rings gang that usually buy the most arms from the Stark group, but also General Ross, the hawkish general. If he sees the value of his weapons, then..." Thinking of this, he activated all the weapon systems on the armor, and at the same time activated the jet thrusters under his feet, flew to the bottom, and then hovered stably in the air. After warming up, missiles, lasers, and pulse cannons were fired at the Hulk at the same time. This seemingly impressive and fierce attack is indeed very terrifying. The combined power directly blew the Hulk more than 10 meters away, and left a huge green wound on his chest. But the coincidence is that the Hulk has a strong self-healing ability and is extremely tolerant. After the Hulk struggled to get up, he turned and looked at Obadiah, his eyes filled with only extreme anger and suffocating murderous intent. The last time Hulk was so angry was when those Indians stared at him and held a female Komodo dragon in their hands. Hulk rushed towards Ironmonger, and with every step, the ground was covered with dust and cracked. Seeing this, Obadiah panicked. He fired all his weapons frantically and increased the power of the jet thrusters under his feet, but the Hulk seemed to feel no pain. In the horrified eyes of everyone, the Hulk grabbed Ironmonger's arm. At that time, Obadiah hadn't reacted yet, and he felt his armor being pulled by an unimaginable force. The sound of metal tearing was extremely harsh, and the Hulk just tore off one of Ironmonger's hands with his bare hands and threw it out like garbage. Obadiah, who was entangled by the Hulk, was terrified. He struggled desperately, but in front of the Hulk, his proud armor was as fragile as paper. Tony saw this scene on the rooftop and took off immediately. He still wanted to ask Obadiah about Ethan's whereabouts. At the same time, the Army's reinforcement helicopters hovered in the air, constantly firing fire bombs at the Hulk from the air. Special Forces snipers also took their positions, although their bullets seemed to have no effect on the Hulk. And these attacks did cause some trouble to the Hulk. He was originally holding Iron Man and wanted to twist his head off, but he was particularly annoyed by these noisy movements. So Hulk roared. While holding Obadiah, he grabbed the gravel and car wreckage on the ground. A truck was thrown by him to the helicopter in the air. Jarvis, start the thrusters. Sir, there is only 16% of the flight energy left. Do as I say. Save people. Tony took off from the rooftop and quickly approached the out-of-control helicopter. Its tail was smashed by the truck, and it could be ready at any time. It might fall down and cause a disaster. Swoosh. Tony came to the bottom bar of the helicopter and turned the propeller power to the maximum. While stabilizing the helicopter, he shouted to the military. Stop it. This will only cause more casualties. However, his warning was not taken seriously, and General Ross continued to do his own thing. At this time, the Hulk suddenly turned his attention to Tony, who was performing emergency rescue on the plane in midair. In the eyes of the Hulk, this flying metal man was also a threat. There was no way. Hulk's idea was very simple. Since the fat Iron Man dared to hurt him, then this mini version of the Tin Man was also not a good bird. So, Hulk grabbed Iron Man's leg with one hand, stomped on the ground to gain strength, and soared into the sky. Before Tony could react, his foot was grabbed by a huge green palm. Then, he felt like he was caught in a giant meat grinder, being thrown around by the Hulk without any rules. Then the armor groaned under the heavy load, and various alarms sounded in his ears. Sir, the structural integrity of the armor is declining sharply. Jarvis' voice was full of urgency. Tony didn't want to talk to Jarvis at this time, but struggled desperately and activated all the weapon systems that could still work. He used palm cannons, single-shot missiles, and even emergency electric shock devices. But these attacks were like mosquito bites to the Hulk, making him even more angry and dizzy, and the degree of damage to the armor rose sharply. In a trance, the Hulk roared and lifted Tony and Obadiah high, then swung their legs and collided with each other violently. Caw! Obadiah and Tony felt as if they were hit by a high-speed train, and the whole world was spinning. Their vision became blurred and their ears were buzzing. Seeing the Hulk lift them up again, as if ready to give the final blow, Tony had to close his eyes, suppress his nausea, and wait for death to come. Fortunately, Pepper was rescued by me, and I died without regrets. Not really. At least I can die as a hero once, which is worthy of the Stark family's reputation. Bang! With a violent muffled sound, the scene Tony imagined did not appear. Instead, at this critical moment, a strand of black hair suddenly appeared in front of the Hulk, and the movement was so fast that it was almost an afterimage. In Tony's blurred vision, he saw the man catch the Hulk's fist with his bare hands. At this time, Tony's blurred vision gradually focused, and he finally saw the black-haired familiar man in front of him who could easily block the Hulk's fist. It was Jonathan, whom Tony had not seen for many days. However, Jonathan's clothes were completely different from before. Not only did he wear a flashy and streamlined black uniform, with a black robe fluttering behind him, but he also put on a cheap mask with strange patterns on his face. As for why he could recognize him, if it weren't for Jonathan's iconic black hair and black pupils, Tony would really think that some cosplay idiot came up to fight with the Hulk. Just an hour ago, Jonathan received a call from Black Egg, saying that after Pepper sneaked into Obadiah's office files, he found that he was the mastermind behind Tony's murder. So she reported the situation to Coulson, and took him to Obadiah's weapons department to collect evidence. However, after a long time, Coulson did not call Black Egg back to report the situation. Therefore, Nick Fury, who smelled something wrong, immediately called Jonathan and asked him to help. Originally, Jonathan did not want to act in public casually, because he was still under the threat of the Jade Emperor. If he acted rashly, he might be exposed in front of the public, and then the Jade Emperor's spies in the world would also notice him, which would be troublesome. What's more, now the plot has completely deviated from the direction. Through the news broadcast, Jonathan found that the escaped Banner had confronted Obadiah and Tony at some point. If left alone, Tony's mortal immortality story would fall early, and Jonathan also wanted Tony to help him make a micro-reactor, which could provide energy for his absorption, as a micro and over-standard human power bank. So after repeated consideration, Jonathan chose to put on his battle suit in the Black Robe world, and bought a mask at a street stall and put it on, and then rushed to the scene. Unexpectedly, as soon as he arrived, he saw the cruel scene of Tony being lifted by Hulk and about to be blasted to heaven. Jonathan immediately rushed up and caught the Hulk's giant hand that almost smashed Tony's head armor. In Tony's eyes, when the Hulk's giant fist hit Jonathan's small palm, that was nearly 50 times smaller than the same period last year, a very visually impactful picture was produced. The huge and extremely powerful green fist was simply caught by Jonathan's little hand, and it was difficult to move forward. Jonathan stared at Hulk, shook off his giant hand, and casually patted the non-existent dust on his body, saying, "Big guy, want to fight?" Jonathan still remembered the incredible reward for defeating or tying the Hulk. Taking advantage of the fact that the Hulk has not grown yet, it is the safest choice to take action in advance. And the Hulk was obviously extremely angry at Jonathan, the uninvited guest who suddenly appeared. Not only was his prey snatched away, but he was even provoked. How can this be tolerated? Roar! He roared and threw Tony and the half-dead Obadiah in his hands, stepped on 2 body positions, and swung a fist at Jonathan. But Jonathan didn't even have the desire to move in the face of this attack. He simply stood there. When Hulk's fist hit his face, transparent ripples instantly appeared around him. Then, a large amount of green energy began to penetrate into Jonathan's body surface at a speed visible to the naked eye, and merged with the cells. As the absorbed kinetic energy surged upward, Jonathan's pupils began to glow with the same green light as Hulk's. "Big guy, do you know what anti-armor is?" Before the confused Hulk could react, Jonathan put all the kinetic energy he had just absorbed into his right hand, and then hit Hulk's chin with an uppercut. With a muffled bang, Hulk's 3-meter-tall body was directly knocked several meters away by Jonathan's light punch, and his body knocked down several armored vehicles in succession before he could stabilize. After standing up with the help of the ground, Hulk's eyes flashed with a trace of human doubt. He felt particularly uncomfortable. He always felt that the force of that punch was extremely similar to his own. But this doubt quickly disappeared as his fighting spirit soared, replaced by an even angrier Hulk in a rage that was about to lose his mind. He actually saw. The black man wearing an ugly mask actually waved his finger at him like Banner was playing with a puppy. Hoo-hoo. What can be tolerated? At this time, Hulk's eyes were bloodshot, his muscles were swollen and almost exploded, and he pounded his fists into the ground, and then the ground of the entire block was shaken. "Hulk is going to crush you." Jonathan's mouth was grinning in the distance. Tisk tisk tisk. Kids are so easy to fool. At this moment, Hulk accelerated and rushed towards Jonathan. The huge green body moved at an astonishing speed, leaving deep dents on the ground with every step. As the distance got closer, Hulk swung his huge fist and punched Jonathan in the face. However, Jonathan's reaction speed was faster. He easily dodged Hulk's attack, grabbed Hulk's wrist, and used Hulk's own momentum to throw him to the open space on the side, avoiding further damage to the surrounding buildings. You know, this is Stark Industries' property. After returning from Afghanistan, Jonathan invested money in Stark stocks. If this land is affected, his money will fall. You can be with anyone, but you can't be with money. Paw. Hulk rolled on the ground for a few times, but soon got up. Roar. Then, the furious flames in his eyes became more intense, and the roar was deafening. Hulk doesn't like flying. Hulk is going to smash you. Then, he clenched his fists and launched a violent attack on Jonathan. This time, Hulk did not intend to attack in a single way, but chose multiple attacks until Jonathan was beaten into a meat paste. Therefore, fists fell on Jonathan's body like raindrops. However, Jonathan's energy absorption has always been in an active triggering state. Every punch of Hulk is like hitting cotton, weak and soft, and there is not even any rebound, which makes Hulk extremely frustrated. He has always felt that all kinds of hits are like hitting flesh. This slime-like disgusting feeling even made Hulk think that he was beaten with shit. On the other hand, Jonathan was bombarded by the Hulk, and all the kinetic energy absorbed by his body was transformed into the purest green energy to supplement the proliferation strength of cells. As the number of attacks increased, the green energy continued to accumulate, and therefore, Jonathan's form changed again. His figure rose sharply to 2 meters, and his explosive muscles were also revealed under the tight uniform. The only flaw was that Jonathan's hair inevitably turned green, which gave him a sense of gender-transformed Jalen Cujo. So comfortable. Feeling the warm current in his body due to the expansion of power, Jonathan stared at the frustrated Hulk, and showed a signature smile of the motherland under the mask. If you want to beat Hulk into submission, you have to fight him with your fists. Ha, come on. Jonathan took a deep breath, his eyes flashing with a strange light. He had never fought such a brutal and fist-to-flesh fight. So Jonathan did not hesitate, and ran out with force, turning into a black light and rushing towards Hulk, so fast that the soldiers around him could only see a blurry avocado afterimage. Although Hulk did not know why the little man in front of him suddenly turned into his own exclusive color. But the obvious provocation of the other party made him extremely unhappy. Coupled with the cotton-like frustration during the fight just now, Hulk gritted his teeth, exhaled 2 thick breaths from his nostrils, and also rushed in the direction of Jonathan. While running, Hulk roared and swung his huge fist, but Jonathan had already anticipated this blow. He nimbly dodged sideways, and at the same time, his right fist hit Hulk's chin like a cannonball. Bang! A deafening roar echoed in the air. Hulk staggered back, obviously shocked by the sudden power. He was a little puzzled. Why was Jonathan's power stronger than before? So Hulk roared again, and his strength increased again, and he punched Jonathan's chest with a straight punch. But this time, Jonathan did not dodge, but blasted out the fist that was about to reach full energy reserve. Bang! The surrounding buildings trembled and shook due to the shock wave of the 2 fists colliding. The strong wind spread, and the gravel and dust were splashed everywhere. The most unlucky ones were the soldiers who were watching the battle nearby. Although General Ross gave the order to shut down the engine the moment Jonathan appeared, they were immediately knocked away by the impact before they had time to run, and the people in the back row were even overturned. No one was spared. Waiting for the smoke and dust to dissipate, I saw that Hulk's figure was still upright, but Jonathan took a half step back. Has the anger increased? Jonathan muttered to himself thoughtfully. But, it's obviously too far away. I'm not excited yet. As he said that, Jonathan continued to rush forward, leaping into the sky with a big jump, clasping his fists, and smashing hard at where Hulk was. Seeing this, Hulk just turned his head away and let Jonathan's punch hit his shoulder. Then he raised one hand to hold Jonathan's arm, and the other fist was like a giant barbell, aiming at Jonathan's head and smashing it down. Jonathan would naturally not let Hulk succeed. Although the energy stored in his head had not reached the full value, it was hard not to guarantee that this movement would shatter his mask. When the power exceeded the threshold, it would also hit the entity's face. So, Jonathan quickly picked out one hand and tightly grasped Hulk's arm, like an iron clamp, with 5 knuckles tightly grasping, and nails deeply piercing Hulk's skin. Since the power gap was not big, Jonathan's power could easily break Hulk's defense. And Hulk could naturally feel obvious pain. He grinned and tried to struggle to loosen up, but Jonathan did not choose to let go, but tried harder. At this time, Hulk felt uncomfortable, so he wanted to push himself to the ground and get rid of Jonathan's restraint. But Jonathan only had his own reward in his eyes now, so he didn't care about Hulk's feelings. Holding Hulk's arm tightly, Jonathan took the opportunity to counterattack, holding the ground with both feet stable, and then swung his right fist flexibly, hitting Hulk's face with 2 big fists. Being hit in the face, Hulk naturally couldn't swallow this breath and wanted to fight back. But Jonathan was a person who had learned fighting skills for 3 years. His hand just pinched Hulk's tendons, causing Hulk to be unable to use any strength at all, and could only be incompetent and furious on the spot. Having this kind of impotent fury is simply a great tonic for Jonathan. You know, the more angry the Hulk is, the stronger he becomes. And Jonathan, the sixth man, has the same energy absorption as the star-absorbing technique. No matter how much strength the Hulk gains during the wrestling, Jonathan directly absorbs his kinetic energy. Frustrated. It's really too frustrating. Hulk never figured out why the strength he gained with great difficulty was gone. Instead, the opponent's strength became stronger and stronger, and what grabbed his arm was more like an oversized trap, almost pinching into the bone. But he really didn't accept it. At this moment, Jonathan naturally read the Hulk's fighting and unconvinced eyes, and then his whole mouth grinned and made a strange laugh. He. Don't accept it. Then I'll beat you until you accept it. So, with Hulk feeling strongly uneasy, he enjoyed the private VIP customization service from Mr. Pierce. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of Jonathan's punches hitting Hulk's face continued to ring out, extremely fierce. Hulk's resistance became more and more fierce. Jonathan borrowed the force of the enemy, and took all of Hulk's principle as interest. The more he invested, the harder he hit. Jonathan's facial spa lasted for several minutes. Under Hulk, the ground around him had turned into a ruin. In order not to let Hulk's swollen face affect his interest, Jonathan chose to put out the system panel, cover it on Hulk's head, and stared at the panel. Conditions have been met. Reverse transcription entries have been issued. Until he saw the conditions for obtaining the reward on the system panel, Jonathan stopped with a sense of satisfaction. Since Hulk was defeated, does it mean that Banner's personality has returned to normal? Jonathan did not rush to the mailbox to collect the reward. Instead, he looked at the Hulk in front of him with great anticipation. He closed his eyes. Maybe he was fainted. This should not be considered child abuse, right? Jonathan said, preparing to get up. At this time, the Hulk's huge body began to shrink until it turned back to the normal form of Dr. Banner. Jonathan glanced at him and didn't expect Banner to wake up, so he hurried over and helped Banner. Dr. Banner, how do you feel? I don't know why I feel a little leaky in my mouth. Hey, who are you? I'm Jonathan. It's not convenient to say here. Jonathan opened a crack in the mask so that Banner could recognize his face and confirm his identity. How did I get here? Didn't I become the Hulk? Why did your hair turn green? Banner, who had just woken up, had no memory of the Hulk and had been holding back a lot of questions. And at this moment, seeing that the battle suddenly stopped and the Hulk's huge body disappeared, General Ross, who was staring not far away, found something wrong. So he waved his hand and asked the soldiers gathered around to go and check what was going on. Hey, Doctor, Jonathan said in a low voice. I think we'd better go to another place to continue our conversation. There are too many people here. It's probably not convenient. Your old lover is watching us from behind. Old lover, are you talking about General Ross? Oh, could it be true? Okay, Doctor, please hold on to me. Oh, okay. Seeing that the soldiers around him were gradually trying to surround him, Jonathan grabbed Banner's waist. After exchanging a glance with Tony, who was lying dead with his old waist not far away, Jonathan immediately accumulated energy with his feet, bent his knees and jumped, turning into an avocado afterimage and soaring into the sky. Looking at the gradually disappearing black spot in the sky, Tony seemed to have some bad memories in his mind. That lucky guy will vomit when he comes down, I promise. Sir, you do have vomit residue at the corner of your mouth. Shut up, Jarvis. 10 o'clock in the morning. Tony stood in front of the French window on the top floor of the Stark Industrial Building, overlooking the busy city of New York. He held a glass of whiskey in his hand, and the ice cubes gently collided in the amber liquid, making a crisp sound. Behind him, the TV was playing a live press conference about the incident last night. Stark Industrial Incident. Lieutenant Colonel James Rhodes. On the first floor of the Stark Industrial Building. Rhodes stood on the podium, holding two carefully prepared manuscripts in his hands, one for him and one for Tony to read after he came down. I'm sure you all have received the official report of what happened at Stark Industries last night. There are unsubstantiated reports of sightings of green humanoid monsters and mysterious men in black robes. The fact is that the military conducted a fixed-point test of humanoid robots here yesterday. But due to the confusion of the core data, a green robot went out of control. We sent another black humanoid robot for emergency rescue. Fortunately, one of Tony Stark's personal bodyguards participated in the rescue, otherwise it would have led to more serious consequences. Tony, come and sit down, you need to cover the wound on your face with foundation. Oh, Iron Man, what's the name? Tony sat on the chair, holding this morning's explosive newspaper, and Pepper next to him was mixing foundation to neutralize Tony's skin color. It seems catchy and loud, although it's not accurate. The suit is made of gold and titanium alloy, but this intention is obvious. Tony looked at it and said narcissistically, not noticing that the headline on the front page of the newspaper was, Iron Man lost to the Green Monster, and the man in black robe showed up to save the situation. And just at this time, Coulson, who had been waiting next to him, came out and handed Tony a note. Mr. Stark, this is your alibi. You were on your yacht at the time of the incident. Tony took the note and glanced up casually. We have a port report proving that you were in Avalon all night, and sworn testimony from your 50 guests. Oh, maybe it was just Pepper and I who were alone on the island, that's it, okay. Just read it. But it doesn't seem to mention Stan. That's been taken care of. He went on vacation. Small aircraft have a poor safety record. Quote. But what about the cover story about the bodyguard? He's mine. Isn't that too untenable? Tony always felt that it was unreliable. The media's IQ is not that of a 3-year-old child. Expecting this bullshit to convince them is as ridiculous as your dog being able to fix the Wi-Fi next door. This is not the first time we've done this, Mr. Stark. Just follow the official story, and it will all be over soon. You have 90 seconds to sort it out, and you'll be on stage soon. Okay. Tony was helpless. He really wanted to tell the truth. At this time, Pepper pulled Coulson aside and said, Agent Coulson, I want to say thank you very much for all your help. Pepper's gratitude came from the heart. If it weren't for these covers, she might have to get up early and stay up late every day to do public relations, at least for a month and a half. This is our duty, and we'll be in touch again. Quote. You are called Homeland Strategy. We have changed our name, just call us S.H.I.E.L.D. Pepper returned to Tony and looked at her watch. There was 1 minute left. Tony, shall we start? Tony stood up and let Pepper fix her appearance and turn up her collar. Pepper, even I don't think I look like Iron Man. Tony, you are not Iron Man. I am. Okay, whatever you want. At this time, Tony carefully looked at Pepper in front of him. A head of smooth and lightly fragrant blonde hair, a shallow red dimple, and a serious look that showed a temperament that Tony was particularly fascinated by. Staring at her beautiful eyes, Tony teased. If I were Iron Man, I would have a girlfriend who knew my true identity, and she would be devastated. Quote. Because she would be very worried about whether I would die, but she would be proud of my achievements, she would be very conflicted, and this would make him even more crazy about me. Don't you think about that night? You mean the night we danced together? Pepper tied Tony's tie and recalled with an expression that was difficult to detect emotions. Then we went to roof, you go downstairs to get the wine, and then you left me alone, you mean that night? Quote. Hearing this, the ambiguous atmosphere that Tony originally wanted to create was suddenly broken, and he had to show an awkward smile. Nothing else, right? Nothing, Miss Potts. At this time, Lieutenant Colonel Rhodes on the first floor had almost finished his opening remarks. Now, Mr. Stark has prepared a statement. Let me make it clear in advance that he will not accept questions, thank you. Tony, who came out of the elevator, just hit the spot, so he strode onto the podium and picked up the manuscript under the eyes of many reporters and cameras. On the way, he happened to see an acquaintance sitting at the bottom. It was the female reporter, Christine, who provided him with information about Camilla at the birthday party that day. Ahem, it's been a while since I last saw you. Let's read from the script this time. Tony cleared his lungs and continued. Some people speculate that I was involved in the incident that happened in Stark's abandoned armed department. Sorry, Mr. Stark, do you really expect us to believe that it was a bodyguard in a battle suit who happened to show up and the robot on the scene went out of control? At this time, Christine, who was sitting below the stage, crossed her legs and asked sharply. As a friend of Tony's weapons that he used once and then discarded, she was unwilling to miss any opportunity to embarrass him. Oh, even though you and I know that the situation is confusing, as for the official statement, it is one thing, but making crazy accusations or implying that I am a superhero is another matter. I didn't say you were a superhero. Christine looked at Tony with disdain. This face that is still a playboy, if he can become a superhero, then the sow will climb a tree. Hearing Christine's doubts, Tony's heart flashed with a hint of eagerness. He stared at Christine tightly and said in a roundabout way. Really, that's good, because it's unrealistic and whimsical. Although I'm not a hero, I have a lot of character flaws, have made so many mistakes, and am very open. Tony thought about it and felt unhappy. He is indeed not a good person, but he firmly believes that he developed the Mark series armor not to show off, but to defend his ideals. He is right, but being questioned everywhere here, how can Tony, who has always regarded himself as a genius and arrogant, bear it? Thinking about it, Tony's eyes gradually solidified, his mind was constantly wandering, and the words he said were also unified with what he thought in his heart. Tony paused for a while and put down the manuscript in his hand. The fact is, I am Iron Man. At the same time, in downtown New York City, Jonathan was enjoying a massage from his female secretary Haizan on the top floor of the company building. In front of him was a TV set, which was playing the classic scene of Tony admitting that he was Iron Man at the press conference. I am Iron Man. As soon as these words came out, the whole place was instantly ignited, the surrounding media rushed in frantically, and the camera position in the TV was also messed up by the crowd. I knew that with Tony's personality, he would definitely not be able to tolerate other people's doubts, and what should happen still happened. Jonathan said, turned off the shaking TV screen, picked up a piece of watermelon and took a big bite, and began to recall. Just last night, Jonathan took Dr. Banner to the sky and fled the battlefield, and finally landed in a suburb where there were few people. After questioning, Dr. Banner made a temporary decision to escape because he was worried that his wanted warrant would implicate Jonathan. But Banner didn't expect that Jonathan could have this special ability to fight the Hulk. Smart Banner knew not to ask questions that he shouldn't ask, but he was completely relieved and planned to follow Jonathan steadily and work for Concept Technology Company. However, this operation was commissioned by Director Black Egg, so Jonathan still had to bring Banner back to S.H.I.E.L.D. and let him communicate with the Egg first. Due to Banner's special nature, Black Egg has been sending people to keep an eye on him. The prototype of the Avengers plan in his mind has been planned almost, and what he needs most at this stage is manpower. Apart from Jonathan, the top combat force who is not easy to blackmail, Black Egg naturally put his plan on Banner. And, through Natasha's investigation in India some time ago, Dr. Banner's character and his excellent professional scientific research ability have been highly praised by her. Therefore, before Banner could get comfortable, Black Egg couldn't wait to tell Banner about the Avengers plan and asked for his opinion. However, at the beginning, Banner, who had been in danger many times, didn't want to get involved in this muddy water at all, and refused with a face. No other. General Ross of the military still had his eyes on him. He had to be careful wherever he went, for fear that a superdose anesthetic needle would fly out from nowhere and he would be sliced when he woke up. The Hulk who survived the slices did not belong to his original version at present. This feeling of being targeted by a licking dog is really uncomfortable. However, Black Egg made a good strategy in advance to keep Banner. Before that, he made a deal with General Ross. He promised Banner that as long as he joined S.H.I.E.L.D., S.H.I.E.L.D. would protect him and would not be harassed by General Ross in the future. Hearing this, Banner was moved without hesitation. After all, he had been hunted for almost 3 months. During that period, he could only hide in the slums of India to avoid being hunted. When he was thirsty, he drank Ganges water. When he was hungry, he ate cow dung and fly-free hand-pulled pancakes. Those days were worse than hell. The stray dogs in New York ate better than him. If he joined S.H.I.E.L.D., he would have this security guarantee. As for food, it would not be a problem. But Banner was an honest man who never forgot his gratitude. After considering it, he carefully asked Jonathan. After learning that Jonathan was a consultant here, Banner also agreed and officially joined S.H.I.E.L.D. However, Banner also made a special request. He usually went back and forth between Jonathan's company and S.H.I.E.L.D., satisfying both sides at the same time, ensuring himself while not forgetting to give back. Hearing this request, even if Liu Dan's face was dark, he could only bite the bullet and, happily, agree. Suddenly, the Avengers plan summoned 2 top combat forces. Although the cost was not small, it was satisfied. After leaving S.H.I.E.L.D., Banner moved his luggage to Jonathan's company. Under Jonathan's introduction, Banner and Dr. Stern, the two former, mortal enemies, became colleagues and began to study compound number 5 together. And yesterday, Dr. Stern made new progress in the research of compound number 5. He directly extracted the components of the compound and reconstructed the internal defects again. In the end, the reconstructed compound was called No-6, and its specificity of injection was greatly reduced, and it was suitable for people of all ages. In layman's terms, the injection of this compound No-6 inches is almost no longer lethal, and it can be injected into anyone. At the same time, it is no longer necessary for the injector to have superpowers from a young age, and it will take effect as soon as it is injected, but the randomness of the ability it triggers has not yet been cracked. This problem can be ignored. As long as this number 6 compound is mass-produced, Jonathan can produce superpowered people in large quantities and hold a large amount of living force in his hands. It is not guaranteed that everyone is as awesome as Azu, but the personal C tactics alone are still quite impressive. Not only that, Jonathan also took the time to test the 3 magic fusion ability joy, sorrow, and fear that he got from Hulk by reverse transcription. This ability can strengthen the whole body according to the feedback degree of these 3 emotions. As long as these 3 emotions are higher, Jonathan's upper limit will be stronger. It is worth mentioning that not only himself, Jonathan can even absorb these 3 emotional energies from others to feed back to himself. Unlike the energy-absorbing physique, the emotional energy accumulated by Jonathan will continue to accumulate in the body to become stronger nutrients, and there is no energy storage limit like a power bank. Therefore, as long as Jonathan continues to produce himself or get emotions from others, he will become stronger and stronger. This is a skill that has been created from scratch, but the upper limit is extremely terrifying. The only drawback is anger. Once Jonathan is angered, his strength will be greatly reduced, but the ability of holding breath and concentrating just makes up for this weakness, allowing Jonathan to reach a perfect state. After Tony's self-explosion of his identity as Iron Man, the entire Marvel world has also opened the curtain, and the subsequent battles are almost all planetary or even cosmic. Therefore, Jonathan must seize the opportunity to become stronger in order to face these troubles with ease. The one in front of him is still the lingering Jade Emperor. Just at this time, the number of random crossings within the system is also refreshed. This means that Jonathan has a new copy world to explore to enhance his strength. But before crossing, he must make a plan for both. First, he found Tony and wanted him to help him build a micro-reactor that can store as much energy as possible as a power bank for his ability to meet emergency needs. But Tony has been very busy recently. After the police arrested Obadiah, who was beaten half to death by Hulk, his spinal cord was found to be severely damaged. He was paralyzed in bed and could only move his head. Therefore, Tony, who was kind-hearted, sent Obadiah, the good uncle, to the most remote nursing home in New York, and was very considerate to put a lot of Iron Man figures at the head of Obadiah's bed. The kind that can make ghostly howls on time in the middle of the night. While taking time to discuss Obadiah, Tony was also busy dealing with the accusations of the military and Congress. This group of scum who wanted to get something for free was always trying to get Tony's armor technology. But fortunately, his friend Rhodes tried his best to cover up, so Tony took time to send 2 micro-reactors that were enough to maintain the energy of Mark III for a year to Jonathan. After getting the reactors, Jonathan stuffed them into the system space together with 3 tubes of compound number 6 that were urgently produced. After everything was ready, Jonathan returned to his own office. Here, he installed a sleeping cabin for traveling across time. After all, according to past practice, his travel across time was consciousness travel, and then reconstructing the body in another world. If he fell to the ground without consciousness, it would be really unsightly. Thinking, Jonathan got into the sleeping cabin and closed his eyes. System, travel across time. Schrödinger's cat. Wave particle duality. Term ability superposition. World observation. Anchoring successful. Wish you a pleasant journey. With the last mechanical system sound in his mind, Jonathan's entire consciousness became erratic again, and then, he was wrapped in a dark green unknown substance and began to sprint. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.